the worlds of the heavens starting with Game of Thrones. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 76 Undercurrent. In fact, Xia Changqing's judgment of Asher was very correct. When Beishiotus specially invited the administrator to his home as a guest, an anonymous letter was sent here. The letter said that the figure of the administrator's surviving nephew was found outside the city of Capua. This is undoubtedly a conspiracy. When Beishiotus took Spartacus to the underground arena, Beishiotus was assassinated by two strange slaves, for which Beishiotus was furious. So under the investigation of Barca and Asher, they successfully locked the clues on the administrator's cousin. Ovidus, the cousin of the administrator, is also Beishiotus's creditor. Because Solinus paid for the debt, at his request, Ovidus would pay to hire strange slaves to assassinate Beishiotus. After learning who the real owner was, Beishiotus was also a ruthless person. He took Barca to kill Ovidus's entire family on a dark and windy night. The son of Ovidius was naturally among them. Beishiotus clearly ordered Barca to kill the child, but now a letter suddenly came, and the news that the child was still alive made Beishiotus panic instantly. The child had seen Beishiotus and Barca. If he gave Beishiotus out, Beishiotus would definitely not be able to resist the anger from the administrator. However, all this was Asher's conspiracy. He accidentally heard the conversation between Barca and Pyrrhus, and thus knew about this matter, so he came up with a vicious plan. When Beishiotus was angry and panicked, Asher led the target to Barca without leaving a trace. While Asher was busy carrying out his vicious plan, an undercurrent was quietly surging in the underground prison of the training ground. Barca had a great prestige in the training ground. When Spartacus did not come, he was the first person besides Crescent. And most of the gladiators knew that Barca was in the mood for freedom. Barca lobbied some of his diehards and persuaded them to follow him to freedom with their own hands. It turns out that villains like Asher are still a minority among gladiators. Unknowingly, most gladiators have been spreading the phrase, "I would rather die than be free." And they are willing to take action for this. They would rather die freely in the battle with the Romans than die in the arena like animals. I would rather die than be free. These few words have become the new belief of the gladiators. They no longer pursue the illusory glory of gladiators, but want to fight for freedom. It's just a pity that Crescent is in a very bad state at this time. In the training ground, there are a large number of people who are loyal to Crescent. Spartacus has been in the training ground for too short a time, and because of his personality, he seems to be incompatible with other gladiators, and cannot obtain the loyalty of other gladiators, even if he has become the new champion of Capua. These are all factors that need to be considered. Before this, Beishiotus had listened to Asher's slander, and doubted Barca in his heart. Asher also knew that, if he asked Barca directly, he would definitely not tell the truth. So Asher suggested that Beishiotus ask Pyrrhus first. The relationship between Pyrrhus and Barca was well known to everyone, and Pyrrhus was a kind-hearted person with no scheming at all, so it was easy to get the truth out of him. Beishiotus was evil and first summoned Pyrrhus. Facing this kind-hearted boy, Beishiotus began to perform as an actor. His acting skills were far from the level of an actor, but it was enough to deal with a pure boy like Pyrrhus. It was just that with Xia Changqing's reminder, no matter how innocent Pyrrhus was, he knew how serious the consequences of saying the wrong thing would be. Beishiotus said to Pyrrhus with some guilt that he regretted letting Barca kill Ovidus's youngest son, which made him feel guilty. "Master, it's so unfortunate. Barca also told me about this, but he doesn't regret it, because this is your order, and he will always be loyal to you." Pyrrhus's expression was a little sad, and his acting skills were obviously not up to standard, but Beishiotus didn't notice this. Barca did kill the child, but he didn't want to make Pyrrhus sad, so he lied and said he didn't. However, with Xia Changqing's reminder, Barca had already agreed with Pyrrhus. "Pyrrhus, are you sure that Barca said so? Did he deliberately let the little boy go?" Beishiotus asked anxiously. "Master, Barca would never dare to disobey your order. He did kill the poor little boy. Although I don't want to forgive him, this is the fact." Tears flowed from the corners of Pyrrhus' eyes, and he felt sad for the poor little boy. After listening to the words of the honest and kind Pyrrhus, Basiatus looked a little confused. He waved his hand to send Pyrrhus away, and his eyes were fixed on Asher. The master and servant looked at each other, and Asher's eyes were full of confusion. This script was wrong. The version he heard was obviously not like this. Did he hear it wrong? Asher's face changed. Asher, Barker did not betray me. I want you to find out what happened. Master, maybe Pyrrhus lied? Asher was also a little anxious. The truth of this matter would soon be exposed. If Barker was not killed now, there would be no such good opportunity in the future. Master, it is absolutely true that Barker wanted to redeem himself and get freedom. He may have lied about this matter. The issue of redemption did touch Basiatus. He was not a kind person. As long as Barker could still make money for him now, he would not let Barker go easily. Wanting to be free is itself an act of betrayal. Basiatus's expression flickered uncertainly, and finally his eyes revealed a coldness. If Barker really wanted to be free, then don't blame him for being cruel. If for no other reason, it was because Barker knew too many of Basiatus' secrets, so Basiatus would not dare to let Barker go free. Asher, go and call Barker over. I want to interrogate him in person. Asher lowered his head, a hint of pride flashed in his eyes. He knew that the redemption of his freedom would touch Basiatus's reverse scale. Barker was too naive. A slave who knew many of his master's secrets actually dared to dream of freedom. Chapter 77 Escape. Asher came to the cage under the training ground. At this time, all the gladiators were gathered in the bathroom. Basiatus already had doubts about Barker. Perhaps Asher's lie would soon be exposed, but the gladiators were unwilling to wait any longer. Especially Spartacus. He couldn't wait to reunite with his wife. In the bathroom, many gladiators who were originally talking in a low voice stopped talking after seeing Asher come in. The gladiators didn't like Asher, so they naturally didn't trust Asher. Asher vaguely felt that the atmosphere in the bathroom was a little strange, but he wanted to get rid of Barker so much that he didn't think much about it. He walked straight to Barker. Barker, the master wants to see you. He is in a good mood tonight. If you take this opportunity to redeem yourself, the chance of success will be very high. Asher smiled, and there was deadly poison hidden in his sweet words. Asher dared to guarantee that, if Barker took the initiative to bring up the matter of redemption, Basiatus would never let him go easily. What does the master want to see me for? Barker's face was normal. From the moment Pyrrhus was called away, he knew that Xia Changqing's prophecy had come true. Asher could not be trusted. No matter what he said, he just had to do the opposite. I don't know what the master is thinking, but tonight is indeed a good opportunity. I will help you explain to the master. If successful, how about reducing the money I owe you by half? In order to explain why he was so kind, Asher took the initiative to bring up the debt. However, Asher had no idea that Barker had already known what he was up to. The master called him, and Barker dared not go. He looked involuntarily in the direction of Xia Changqing. Facing Barker's gaze, Xia Changqing nodded at him. As long as Barker did not take the initiative to commit suicide, Xia Changqing was sure that he could get through this. Under the leadership of Asher, Barker came to the front hall and saw Basiatus standing in the dark. I heard that you want to redeem your freedom? Basiatus's tone was calm with a hint of coldness. Barker's heart suddenly moved. At some point, he couldn't help but imagine that Basiatus might directly agree to redeem him. However, this idea only appeared in his mind for a moment and was thrown out of Barker's mind. He was not a stupid person. The fact that Pyrrhus was summoned first had already shown some clues. Basiatus had already doubted him. All this was because of Asher's conspiracy. Barker was very sure of this. So before applying, Barker turned back and looked at Asher meaningfully. Asher didn't understand the meaning of it. He smiled and gave Barker an encouraging look. Barker turned around and said calmly, I don't mean that, master. I'm honored to be a gladiator of the Basiatus family. I will dedicate my soul and blood for the glory of Basiatus. As soon as these words came out, Asher, who was standing behind Barker, was stunned for a moment. He couldn't understand why Barker would brazenly change his words. When the time came, Asher opened his mouth with a changing expression. Just as he was about to say something, he heard Barker continue to speak. Master, I don't know where you heard this rumor from. This person must have evil intentions and wants to alienate the relationship between you and me, the master and servant. Asher's face was uncertain. Barker's words were obviously meant to be. After listening to Barker's words, Beatrice's cold face finally relaxed. It seemed that Barker had no intention of redeeming himself. But how to explain the fact that Ovidus' son was still alive? Barker, of course I trust you. But can you tell me why Ovidus' son is still alive? Barker suddenly understood. Xia Changqing's guesses all came true. Asher really used this incident to frame him. Impossible, master. I cut the child's throat with my own hands. I'm sure he is dead. The administrator is rushing to pick him up. The child. Beatrice was interrupted by a frowning Barker before he finished speaking. Although this was unreasonable, Barker knew that he had to take the initiative. Master, how did the administrator get the news? Beatrice was stunned by the question, and then he said without thinking, just at the banquet just now, someone sent a letter. Barker, what do you want to say? The administrator may bring people to attack my mansion at any time. Master, I wonder if you have noticed the person who sent the letter? Barker picked the loophole in this matter. The people of Capua know that the administrator's cousin and his family are all dead. It is not impossible for a stranger to deceive the administrator with a fictitious letter. After figuring out the matter, Barker talked freely. Impossible. Who would have the courage to deceive the administrator? Beatrice denied it flatly. That's right, master. No one dares to deceive the administrator. If the child is really still alive, didn't the messenger take the opportunity to ask for a reward? I don't believe he would be so kind. Messenger? The messenger seems to be a slave of the administrator's family, or maybe not. I haven't seen him. Beatrice's expression also hesitated. After Barker mentioned this matter was indeed full of doubts. Master, Barker asked, does the letter say where the child was found? It seems to be found north of Capua. Master, please think carefully. How could such a young child, even if he is not dead, walk so far alone in such heavy rain? Barker, do you mean that the letter is fake? It must be so, my master. Barker replied respectfully. After hearing this, no one noticed the storm in Asher's eyes. He never thought that Barker would be such a smart person. However, Asher didn't know that it was not that Barker was too smart, but that Xia Changqing, who knew the plot in advance, was behind the scenes. But this matter is still full of doubts. Who forged the letter, and what his purposes are all unknown. Asher wanted to say something, but he was surprised too much tonight, so much that until now, his heart is still shocked. The plan to get rid of Barker was a sure thing, but now there was such a big loophole. What went wrong? Why did Barker and Pyrrhus change their caliber? Asher was puzzled. Chapter 78 tonight. Walking in the dark passage leading to the cage, Asher finally couldn't help but test Barker. Barker, didn't you want to redeem yourself a long time ago? Why didn't you tell your master? Upon hearing this, Barker felt his anger rising. He didn't need to control his emotions now. Barker grabbed Asher's neck and pressed him against the wall. Asher, don't think that no one knows what you did. If you dare to do anything again, I will break your neck. Asher raised his hands in front of him, indicating that he looked harmless. There were storms in his heart, but he didn't admit what he had done. Be gentle, Barker, my neck is going to break. I don't know what I did to make you so angry. If it's about gambling debts, please rest assured that I will pay you back in full as soon as possible. Facing Asher, who was evasive, Barker didn't pursue it too much. Of course, if they, the gladiators, launched an uprising, he would definitely kill Asher himself. Barker snorted coldly, let go of Asher, and walked into the bathroom alone. He hadn't finished his bath yet. Looking at Barker's departing back, Asher's face was gloomy, and his murderous intent towards Barker grew stronger and stronger. In the bathroom, Xia Changqing looked at Barker, who had successfully returned, knowing that he had escaped this disaster. Barker, how is it? Xia Changqing asked. Barker came close to Xia Changqing and whispered back, Xia, as you expected, Asher is really making trouble in there. If it weren't for your reminder, I might have been killed by Beatrice. Don't worry, Barker, you will have a chance to take revenge yourself. Xia, when are we going to act? Barker asked impatiently. He wanted to smell the scent of freedom as soon as possible, even if it would make him fall into the abyss. There is no time to lose. Tonight. Xia Changqing glanced at Barker and said in a firm tone. Tonight. Isn't it too hasty? How are we going to deal with the weapons? What about Crescent? The Gauls are only willing to follow Crescent. And we don't have the key to the cell, so we can't get out at all. Barker had a lot of questions. Then take Crescent with you and tell the Gauls that Batiatus has given up on Crescent. If they want to save Crescent life and gain freedom, they can't hesitate any longer and must follow us to fight their way out. You don't have to worry about other problems. Just tell the others that they are only responsible for killing all the guards. No problem, Xia. Barker nodded, indicating that he understood, and he set off to inform each gladiator of the news one by one. All the gladiators were ready, just waiting to swing the first sword of the slave uprising. Time passed little by little, and midnight soon arrived. No gladiator fell asleep. Spartacus drew out his hidden dagger and came to Xia Changqing. Xia, I'm ready. What should we do now? Xia Changqing opened his eyes and looked at Spartacus and Vero, who were in the same cell with him. He nodded to them. Freedom was waving to them. As Xia Changqing and Spartacus stood up, the gladiators in the surrounding cells responded one after another. They all came to the entrance of the cage and looked at Xia Changqing and Spartacus quietly. Xia Changqing nodded at Spartacus. Now is the best time. It's late at night and the guards are asleep. As long as the gladiators get weapons, they can capture Batiatus Mansion without any effort. Everyone is watching Xia Changqing's actions. Xia Changqing told the gladiators in advance that he had a way to open the lock of the cage. Unlocking is the first step of an uprising. If the lock of the cage cannot be opened, the idea of a gladiator uprising is a joke. Xia Changqing certainly has a way. He came to the door of his cage, looked at the gladiators around him, and then pulled out a strand of his hair. The moment to witness a miracle has arrived. Xia Changqing pretended to put his hair into the keyhole. From an angle that the gladiators could not see, it seemed as if it had a lifelike shadow swimming into the keyhole. Click. A crisp sound rang out, and the lock opened. All the gladiators were dumbfounded. What was this operation? A question mark seemed to appear faintly on their foreheads. Is this the mysterious power of the Orientals? Using hair to unlock the lock. I really love it. Xia Changqing pushed open the prison door casually, shook his head, and motioned Spartacus and Vero to follow. Taking a deep breath, Spartacus and Vero looked at each other. Once they stepped out of this door, they had no way to look back. However, the two did not hesitate at all. They followed Xia Changqing's footsteps and stepped out of the cage. Although this was only a small step for one person, it was a big step for all slaves. The doors of the underground cages were opened one by Xia Changqing, and the gladiators came out and gathered around Xia Changqing and Spartacus. Everyone looked at the two with eager eyes. Tonight, they will fight for freedom. Let's go get weapons. Xia Changqing whispered and led the way to the storage room where the weapons were stored. The gladiators were silent and followed closely behind. In the silence, an invisible murderous aura gradually permeated. The lock of the storage room could not stop Xia Changqing's shadow power at all. As the wooden door was pushed open, the gladiators filed in and took out daggers and shields. They were not training swords, but real competitive swords. It was a pity that there was no armor in the storage room. Although the gladiators were used to fighting without armor, Xia Changqing thought it was safer to wear armor. Spartacus wore the armor specially made for him by Batiatus, which looked mighty. Xia Changqing held a dagger in his hand, and his eyes swept over all the gladiators. He saw the eagerness in their eyes. The gladiators had been oppressed for too long. It was time for the nobles to see the anger of the gladiators. Target the guards. Don't make too much noise. We must get rid of them as soon as possible and control the entire mansion. Spartacus, Vero, let's go and control Batiatus. Barker, you take people to watch Docket and don't let him leave the room. Also, don't kill innocent people indiscriminately. Slaves may become our helpers in the future. If I find someone killing innocent people indiscriminately, don't blame me for being merciless. Xia Changqing whispered to make sure every gladiator heard his words clearly. The gladiators were all unruly and difficult to control. Xia Changqing was worried that they would get so excited about killing that they would massacre everyone in the mansion. Chapter 79 Questioning. Do you understand what you have to do? Xia Changqing asked again, and the gladiators nodded silently. At least now they were still listening to Xia Changqing's orders. As for what would happen after escaping, it was not a question to consider now. Let's go now. Xia Changqing led the team, and the gladiators came to the iron gate leading to the mansion in a mighty manner. Without any hesitation, Xia Changqing stepped forward to unlock it, and the road to the mansion was unobstructed from this moment on. As soon as the door was opened, the gladiators turned into tigers escaping from the fence, scattered in all directions, and each looked for their own hunting targets. The silent killing unfolded in Batiatus' mansion. Xia Changqing glanced at Spartacus, and several people walked silently to the location of Batiatus' bedroom. After passing the back hall and coming to the front hall, Xia Changqing saw his long sword Winter, which was hung on the wall as a decoration. He stepped forward to take down Winter, and several people went straight to the location of Batiatus. But before Xia Changqing reached Batiatus' door, a shrill scream suddenly sounded. Then, all kinds of scolding and screams rang out one after another. Xia Changqing didn't know what the situation was with the other gladiators. What he could do now was to quickly control Batiatus, and several people quickened their pace. At the door of Batiatus' bedroom, there were slaves who had not slept all night guarding. After seeing Xia Changqing and others who were aggressive and holding weapons, the slaves subconsciously opened their mouths and screamed. Xia Changqing and Spartacus rushed forward at the same time, pushed the slaves away, and broke into Batiatus' room. Neither Xia Changqing nor Spartacus was willing to kill these unarmed slaves. They were also pitiful people. Even if Batiatus was awakened by the slave screams, it would not affect the overall situation. When Xia Changqing and Spartacus entered the room with swords, Batiatus was still in a daze, and he didn't react to what happened at first. When the sword was on his neck, Batiatus finally woke up from his confused state, and a layer of cold sweat had seeped out of his back. Spartacus? Xia? What are you going to do? A scream came from the side, and Xia Changqing punched the screaming Lydia in the face without hesitation. Shut up. If you scream again, I will cut your throat. Xia Changqing said viciously. You damn slaves. You dare to betray me. Listening to the screams and shouts in the mansion, Batiatus already understood what happened, and he scolded the two people in front of him. In Rome, the law stipulates that the punishment for slaves who betray their masters is very strict. Batiatus never expected that Spartacus, who had just become the champion of Capua and was about to reach the peak of his life, would actually betray him. Batiatus had no time to think about how the gladiator escaped from the cage, because Spartacus had punched him and made his nose bleed. Batius, stop talking nonsense and tell me quickly, where is Xia? Ha ha ha. Spartacus, you want to know the whereabouts of your wife, right? Then take the sword away from my neck first. Batius. Xia Changqing said coldly, don't you understand what the situation is now? Batiatus glanced at Xia Changqing, then looked at Spartacus. If you kill me, you will never see your wife again. Now that things have come to this, I might as well tell you clearly. Spartacus, your wife will be here tomorrow, but you can only see her body. I have already ordered to kill your wife halfway. Bastard. Spartacus was furious, and punched Batiatus in the face again and again. Soon, Batiatus, with a bruised face, was bleeding from his mouth. Spartacus. Batiatus shouted loudly, do you want to see your wife die? Calm down, Spartacus. Xia Changqing stopped the furious Spartacus. He grabbed Lydia's hair, and wanted to use Lydia to threaten Batiatus. However, Xia Changqing grabbed a handful of hair and Lydia was wearing a wig. In such a serious occasion, such an embarrassing thing happened. Xia Changqing had a hard time holding back his laughter. He reached out again, and this time he felt that he had a firm grip. He grabbed the screaming Lydia and brought her in front of Batiatus. Choose. Do you want to tell me the whereabouts of Spartacus' wife, or do you want to see your wife die in front of you? Facing Xia Changqing's threat, Batiatus unexpectedly sneered and said disdainfully, you will die if you tell me, and you will die if you don't tell me. I want Spartacus' wife to be buried with us. Xia Changqing's face condensed. He didn't expect Batiatus to be so tough and not afraid of his threat at all. As Batiatus said, if they couldn't find out the whereabouts of Spartacus' wife, Spartacus would never kill them easily. Xia Changqing frowned and thought for a while, then said with concentration, Batiatus, Spartacus and I can swear in the name of the gods that, as long as you tell us the whereabouts of Sulla, we will let you go. No, Xia, I will never agree. Batiatus is the culprit, we can't let him go. As soon as Xia Changqing finished speaking, Batiatus hadn't said anything yet, and Spartacus took the lead in expressing his opposition. Spartacus, do you want your wife to die in vain? Reuniting with your wife has always been your dream. Listen to me, I'll make the decision on this matter. Xia Changqing pulled Spartacus and said firmly, then he looked at Batiatus. How about it, Batiatus? I have shown enough sincerity, one life for two lives, do you want to do this deal or not? Sweat dripped from Batiatus' forehead. If there was a chance, he certainly didn't want to die in vain. Looking at Lydia's pleading eyes, Batiatus' heart was constantly wavering. Batiatus, what are you hesitating about? You know, your life and Lydia's life are just a thought away from us. You have no choice. Spartacus and I are different from you. We will resolutely abide by the oath we made. If we say we will spare your life, we will spare your life. Batiatus' eyes fluctuated violently, and there was a struggle between heaven and man in his mind. However, in the face of the fear of death, even if there was a glimmer of opportunity, as long as he was a human, he would grab it without hesitation. Swear. Hearing Batiatus' relaxed tone, Xia Changqing glanced at Spartacus, and the two began to swear in the name of Jupiter. Chapter 80 A difficult choice. Jupiter is the king of gods in Roman mythology. Xia Changqing and Spartacus swore in the name of Jupiter, and successfully won the trust of Batiatus. In the end, in the face of this chance to survive, Batiatus still bowed his head and told the location where Sulla would pass tomorrow, but Batiatus had already issued an order to kill Sulla before arriving in Capua. If Spartacus wanted to save Souk, he could only find her before Batiatus's men took action. There was still some time before dawn, and Spartacus had enough time to go and save Sulla. However, Xia Changqing looked at Spartacus's anxious look and knew that he was already anxious. Xia Changqing took Spartacus to the door. If they ended the battle in the mansion as soon as possible, they could also leave this place as soon as possible. Looking at the backs of the two leaving, Batiatus and Lydia couldn't help hugging each other and breathed a sigh of relief. Xia Changqing really kept his oath and let them live. What a stupid slave. Batiatus thought secretly in his heart. His eyes were full of hatred. He swore that he would never let these damned slaves go. He would nail them all to death on the cross. Walking to the door, Xia Changqing suddenly turned his head to look at Batiatus, and then a meaningful smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. Vero, Batiatus is in your hands. Xia Changqing looked at Vero standing at the door, and slowly made a throat-cutting motion. Vero immediately understood what Xia Changqing meant, and walked into the room with a sword. Xia, you? Spartacus looked at Xia Changqing with a surprised expression. Xia Changqing smiled coldly. Spartacus, do you want to ask, didn't we swear to Jupiter to let Batiatus go? Yes, we both swore, but Vero didn't swear. It was Vero who killed Batiatus. What does it have to do with us? Spartacus looked at Xia Changqing in amazement. He didn't expect that there would be such an operation. After thinking about it carefully, he actually found that there was nothing wrong with what Xia Changqing said. While the two were talking, the screams of Batiatus and Lydia before they died, and the vicious curses against the two who betrayed their loyalty were heard from inside the house. Xia Changqing smiled indifferently. It was just a curse. This was not some mysterious world. Who would take such a thing to heart? Spartacus, don't think too much. Finish the things here quickly, and you can see Sulla earlier. Upon hearing Sulla's name, Spartacus immediately stopped worrying about it. After Vero came out with a bloody dagger, the three left. Batiatus and Lydia in the house stared at the backs of the three with their eyes wide open. The battle in the entire training ground was almost coming to an end. Under the sudden attack of the gladiators, the sleeping guards were like lambs to be slaughtered, without any power to fight back. Although there were twists and turns in the middle, they were harmless. The guards were soon slaughtered by the gladiators. All the slaves were gathered together. They stood in the hall and crowded together, as if this would make them feel safe. Surrounded by blood-stained gladiators, under Xia Changqing's order, the gladiators did not attack these slaves. Xia, we have to take these people away. They will die if they stay here. Looking at the slaves gathered together, Spartacus's compassion broke out. It must be said that Spartacus is a man with great love in his heart, otherwise he would not have set off the largest slave uprising in Roman history. Spartacus, can you tell me what you are planning? Do you want to find Sulla and then escape to the mountains and forests and live a hermit life, or do you want to lead these gladiators to do something and liberate more slaves? Xia Changqing looked at Spartacus, wanting to know what he was thinking. At this time, Sulla was not dead yet, and Xia Changqing was not sure what Spartacus was thinking. Spartacus, follow your heart. If you just want to live in seclusion with Sulla, then there is no need to care about these slaves, because you can save them temporarily, but you can't save them forever. If it is the second option, you will need the support of these slaves. Xia Changqing's question directly confused Spartacus. He had always been thinking about reuniting with Sulla, and had not thought so far. I haven't thought about it, Spartacus said with a confused expression, and suddenly he looked at Xia Changqing. What about you, Xia? In my heart, you have always been a very mysterious person. What are your plans? Me. Looking at Spartacus, Xia Changqing suddenly smiled indifferently. Spartacus, don't forget, I'm an Oriental. I have no interest in overthrowing the rule of Rome, and slaves will not trust an Oriental. So if you want to liberate more slaves, only you, Spartacus, can do it. Xia Changqing was right. He respected and admired Spartacus very much in his heart, but he would not follow Spartacus's path. The path of liberating slaves was too tiring, and the possibility of failure was too great. Throughout the history of ancient and modern times, there were very few successful cases of uprisings by the lower classes. If Rome was a country in a divided war, the slave uprising would have a chance of success. But the current situation is that Rome is too powerful. They have a well-trained army, while the slave uprising army is a group of rabble, and they are constant infighting. Their failure is doomed. However, Xia Changqing would not affect Spartacus's choice. The reason why Spartacus was great was because of his spirit of doing what he knew was impossible. And Spartacus, I can tell you clearly that the practice of liberating slaves in Rome has a very small chance of success. In this process, people will continue to die. You may die, Sulla may also die, it's all possible. This is destined to be a difficult process. Everything depends on your own choice. Spartacus's thoughts kept changing, and he was now full of confusion. Spartacus, who had not experienced the death of his wife and friends, had not yet completely firmed his beliefs. I don't know how to choose, Xia, but I will never let these people stay here and die miserably. Even if I die, I will die as a free man. Spartacus, I respect your choice. Xia Changqing knew that Spartacus would not easily abandon these slaves. Go, and convince them. This is not a one-sided thing. Maybe you want to take everyone away with you, but they may not be willing. A forced melon is not sweet. Xia Changqing deeply understands this truth. Chapter 81 Persuasion. In Batiatus' mansion, the killing has come to an end, and the gladiators have gathered in the hall one after another. All the slaves were gathered together. They were panic-stricken and trembling. Spartacus, who was full of love, put away his sword and came to the slaves, inspiring them passionately to welcome the upcoming free life. Xia Changqing and Vero stood in the corner of the hall, quietly looking at Spartacus's back. They had to admit that Spartacus was indeed a very charming person, and he was born to be a leader. After standing there for a while, Xia Changqing retracted his gaze. There were still many things to deal with. Vero, where is Barca? Xia Changqing asked. Barca? He doesn't have time now. He should be torturing Asher. Vero replied in a relaxed tone. Let him hurry up. We don't have time to waste too much time here. Xia Changqing gave orders, while turning his eyes around and quickly placed them on Pyrrhus. Pyrrhus, take the brothers, and bring all the weapons and leather armor in the mansion. We need these things. Also, ask someone where Batiatus hid his gold coins. No problem, leave it to me. Pyrrhus, who was originally watching the excitement, agreed and immediately took some gladiators, to search for money and items in the mansion. Although the gladiators were used to not wearing armor, Xia Changqing thought it was not a good habit. There would be many more battles in the future, and armor would be of great help. Xia, I think you should come and see. Docket is furious. How do we deal with him? A gladiator trotted over and found Xia Changqing, interrupting his search for Batiatus's hiding place. Following the footsteps of the gladiator, Xia Changqing came to the outside of Docket's room. At this time, a gladiator was holding Docket's door tightly to prevent him from coming out, and Docket was also cursing in the house. Docket, calm down. Xia Changqing shouted outside the door. Xia. Docket stopped cursing. Let me out, Oriental boy. What have you done? I can show up at your door. Doesn't that prove the problem? Docket, I can let you out, but you have to choose first whether to be our enemy or friend. You really betrayed the Batiatus family and the glory of being a gladiator. Docket shouted harshly. Xia Changqing sneered. Gladiators don't have any honor to speak of. We are just a group of poor people for the Romans to enjoy. Docket, tell you to choose. My patience is limited. Xia, you don't understand what the glory of a gladiator is. You will never be a real gladiator. Docket, as you said, I don't want to be a gladiator at all. I would rather be a free fighter. I'd rather die than be free. Xia Changqing shouted loudly. Docket is a rare fighting force, and it would be great to get him to join the group. Live free or die. The gladiators surrounding Xia Changqing shouted one after another. Their voices passed through the wooden door and reached Docket's ears, making the gladiator trainer silent for a while. Docket, did you hear that? This is the cry of freedom. We have a new belief, that is freedom. We no longer believe in gods, and freedom will become a lifelong pursuit. Even if we die, we will die in the battle for freedom. Freedom is a fatal temptation for slaves and gladiators. In the room, Docket did not speak for a long time. Time passed by minute. Just when Xia Changqing's patience was about to wear out, Docket finally spoke. Xia, I have to admit that the freedom you talk about is too tempting. I promise to join you and fight for freedom, but if I find that you have betrayed this belief, I will leave directly. Xia Changqing showed a smile at the corner of his mouth. He knew that Docket was not a person who accepted his fate. He also had the heart to resist. Xia Changqing nodded and signaled the gladiator to open Docket's door. Docket, welcome to join the ranks of freedom fighters. The door opened, and Docket walked out of the house. He stared at Xia Changqing with wide eyes, as if he had just met him for the first time. Xia, I admit that I underestimated you. Where is Batiatus? Did you kill him? Don't worry, Docket. Batiatus and Lydia have already thrown themselves into the arms of the goddess of death. Pack up your things, we have to leave quickly. Docket didn't have anything to pack. He was still wearing muscle armor. Standing in the house, where he had lived for many years, Docket stared closely at the whip he used when training, and then he turned around and left without any nostalgia. The whip represented his identity as a gladiator trainer. Now Docket has abandoned the whip and his identity as a trainer. He is now just a freedom fighter. Xia. Docket came to Xia Changqing quickly. What are your plans next? After what happened tonight, the administrator will not let it go. Docket, let's leave Capua first and find Spartacus' wife. Batiatus admitted that he ordered her to be killed before Sulla arrived in Capua. We don't have much time. Hearing this news, Docket's face was also very ugly, but his face was dark, and ordinary people could not see the change in his face. However, Docket soon thought of another problem, and he hurriedly asked, if we leave like this, what about Chris? He is now seriously injured and unconscious. If he is left here, he will definitely die. Xia Changqing's heart flashed with obscurity. Chris has been in the training ground for so long that most of the gladiators are his diehards, and even Docket, the trainer, cares about him. If it weren't for these reasons, Xia Changqing would definitely abandon Chris directly. In a team, only one leader is enough. If there are too many voices, civil strife is inevitable. It's just a pity that most people would not agree to abandon Chris. Let's take Chris with us. He is our brother. We can't abandon him. Xia Changqing said with a serious face. He smiled bitterly in his heart. What he said was too hypocritical. However, Xia Changqing did not think that his idea was wrong. Without Chris, there would probably not be so many civil strife in the rebel army. But even if he took Chris with him, Xia Changqing did not think that he would be able to survive during the escape. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 82 Differences. When Xia Changqing returned to the hall of the mansion, Spartacus had finished his speech, and all the slaves had different looks in their eyes. That was the desire for freedom. Although the road to freedom was full of ups and downs and thorns, it was also sweet. The dinar hidden by Bacchius was searched out, and the whole mansion was turned upside down. Some gladiators were wearing crooked leather armor belonging to the guards. Xia Changqing asked people to collect the guards' weapons. Most of the guards' weapons were long-handled spears. The spears were distributed to the slaves. It didn't matter if they didn't know martial arts. If they really encountered danger, they could just stab them hard with the sharp end. If they couldn't even do this, Xia Changqing didn't think these people were worth saving. Spartacus, let's go. The gladiators gathered together again. They opened the door of the mansion, strode out, and the figures quickly merged into the darkness. Behind them, a raging fire was burning, and the mansion of the Bacchius family was completely burned down. The rainy season in Capua had just arrived, and it rained heavily, but it still couldn't put out the fire in the mansion. Because the mansion of the Bacchius family was built on a small hill, it was located in a remote place, and no one would set foot here at ordinary times. By the time someone found out that the mansion of the Bacchius family had been burned down, 5 days had passed. No one would think that this was the result of a slave uprising, because in Rome, there had never been such a large-scale slave uprising, and the administrator was even more reluctant to take care of these things. His cousin's family had been killed, and there was no result yet. By chance, Xia Changqing and Spartacus and others had gained enough time to stay away from Capua. During this time, Spartacus also successfully reunited with his wife Sulla, and after many ups and downs, he finally got what he wanted. Unlike what was imagined, no regular Roman army has come to search for them so far. Xia Changqing brought up the old story again. According to the current situation, as long as they keep a low profile and don't think about liberating more slaves, they are likely to live a free life. This is also the common voice of most slaves. After all, people are selfish creatures. As long as they can live well, few people will worry about the life and death of others. What did not exceed Xia Changqing's expectations was that Spartacus wanted to save more people with his own ability. This was his awareness as a hero, and Spartacus' wife Sulla also fully supported him to do so. It was precisely because they all had the experience of being slaves that they could most personally experience the sorrow of being slaves. So far, the gladiators who came out of the Bacchius training ground began to have internal differences. The faction headed by Barca believed that, since they were free now, why should they bother to trouble themselves? Isn't it okay to live a stable life? Moreover, after such a long time, Crescent's injuries have worsened further. It is hard to say how many days he can hold on. Barca is unwilling to follow Spartacus, to live a life of blood and knife. Then those who supported Spartacus were Docet and Vero, but their number was too small. Most of the slaves wanted to escape to the forest in the east to live. There was no dispute, hunting and planting there, which was perfect. Xia Changqing watched coldly, with a hint of sadness in his heart. The slave uprising was doomed to fail for a reason. Just after escaping from the cage, the internal division had already split into two factions. Without a unified voice, how could it not fail? Although Spartacus's ideal was great, Xia Changqing did not think he could succeed, but he would not stop Spartacus. However, what Xia Changqing did not expect was that both factions wanted to win his support. It was just that Xia Changqing had no intention of joining any faction. He was destined to be a lonely traveler and a passerby in this world. He could not help Spartacus build a free and equal country. Of course, the friendship between the two was not false, and Xia Changqing was not a cold-blooded and ruthless person. When Spartacus needed help, Xia Changqing would not be stingy. At night, Xia Changqing found Spartacus. Xia, I thought you supported me. Spartacus looked at Xia Changqing with a complicated expression. When Xia Changqing did not express his opinion at the first time, he had already vaguely sensed that Xia Changqing's thoughts were different from his. Xia Changqing just shook his head when he heard it. Spartacus, I'm an Oriental, I told you earlier. I'm destined to be a lonely traveler. In order to understand Rome, I came from the Far East. Becoming a slave is just an accident. Xia Changqing slowly said the excuse he had used before, and Spartacus's face was obviously disappointed. Are you going back to the East? Spartacus asked with some regret. Yes. Xia Changqing agreed. In fact, whether it was the big man in the East or Rome, it made no difference to Xia Changqing. Xia Changqing had already planned to leave Spartacus. Life in the training ground and the training of gladiators allowed Xia Changqing to get a systematic adjustment, and his strength had already increased significantly, reaching the system's task requirements. Just thinking of his friendship with Spartacus and Vero, Xia Changqing wanted to find a way out for Spartacus. Liberating slaves and leading slave uprisings were Spartacus's pursuits. Xia Changqing would not persuade him. Perhaps Spartacus could follow Xia Changqing's advice to live in seclusion, but he would feel bad in his heart. Xia Changqing did not intend to stop Spartacus, but would try to find a way out for him. After hearing Xia Changqing's definite answer, a touch of sadness appeared on Spartacus' face. Xia, when are you going to leave? Do we have a chance to meet again in our lifetime? As long as we are destined, we will definitely have a chance to meet again. Xia Changqing nodded and said to Spartacus very confidently, don't worry, I won't leave quietly without a word. I will definitely tell you before I leave. Xia Changqing frowned and thought about the reasons why Spartacus' uprising failed in the original history, trying to find some places that are worth being vigilant about. Spartacus, listen to me. If you want to liberate the slaves and lead them to a successful uprising, you must pay attention to what I'm going to say next. Spartacus's face also became serious, and he listened attentively to Xia Changqing's advice. Chapter 83, Parting Ways. Spartacus, believe it or not, an army composed of slaves can never defeat the regular Roman army. Although the gladiators have strong individual combat capabilities, in large-scale battles, individual strength is too weak. If you want to win, you need to organize the slaves who can fight, train them like regular troops, and bring out the power of the team instead of relying on individual courage. Moreover, there is only one voice in the team, and that is your voice, Spartacus. You can listen to other people's opinions, but you must remember that you can only be the leader. As soon as Xia Changqing said this, Spartacus frowned. Xia, I think we are all equal. If everyone else has to obey my orders, then what is the difference between me and the Roman nobles? Spartacus, are you stupid? You didn't force them to do things they didn't want to do. Of course, you are different from the Roman nobles. Listen to me, if there are too many voices inside, the uprising is bound to fail. This is my advice to you. Also, Spartacus, don't let your hatred for the Romans blind your eyes. Not all Romans need to be killed. There are good people and ordinary civilians among them. You can kill those in power, but you can't kill civilians without reason. This is a very important point. Otherwise you will find that the whole of Rome will hate you, and no one will be willing to help you. No Roman is willing to help us now. Spartacus said with a frown. Xia Changqing waved his hand, signaling Spartacus not to interrupt, and he continued, after the number of people grows, you will need a base. A life of wandering around will only allow the Roman army to eat you up bit by bit. Then pay attention to the internal ideological work, Spartacus. People's hearts are complicated. Not all slaves are willing to be free. You must pay attention to this. Xia Changqing racked his brains to squeeze out the knowledge he had read and thought about before, hoping to help Spartacus. As for whether Spartacus is willing to listen, whether he can do it, that is not his business. That night, Xia Changqing and Spartacus stayed up all night and talked for a long night, raising various possibilities for future problems and then discussing how to solve these problems. When it was dawn, Sulla interrupted the two people. Xia Changqing suddenly realized that he and Spartacus had been discussing all night, and after being interrupted, he was also sleepy. Waving his hand, Xia Changqing stood up and stretched his body. Spartacus, I have told you all the problems I can think of. I can only wish you good luck with how things will develop in the future. Xia, are you leaving me now? Spartacus said hurriedly, his face full of reluctance. Don't be so ambiguous, okay? Xia Changqing said with disgust, even if I want to leave, I have to get a good night's sleep. After saying that, without paying attention to Spartacus's embarrassed look on his face, Xia Changqing went into his room. They are now in an abandoned manor in Capua, but this must not be a place to stay for a long time. When Xia Changqing woke up, it was already evening. He just opened his eyes and heard noisy sounds coming from outside the house. Xia Changqing got up, tidied his leather armor, hung Winter on his waist, and pushed the door out. Outside, in the central hall of the abandoned manor, the roof had disappeared, and the rainy weather for many days finally stopped for a while, and the afterglow of the sun fell. The people in the hall had already split into two groups. Barker and others carried all kinds of supplies with them. Behind him, there were gladiators carrying Chryse. They were ready to leave. Seeing Xia Changqing walking out of the house, Barker couldn't help but persuade him again. Xia, don't you really consider leaving with us? Yes, Xia, come with us. Pyrrhus, who was leaning on Barker, couldn't help but shout at this time. However, Xia Changqing just shook his head. Barker, Pyrrhus, you have your life, and I have my own goals. Let's say goodbye here. I wish you all the best. Okay, Xia, I also wish you to return to the east and your parents as soon as possible. After Barker finished speaking, he looked at Spartacus again. Spartacus, I admire your courage and belief, but I don't agree with you doing this. However, I hope you remember that we are not traitors. When you are desperate, you can come to find us. Spartacus nodded at Barker. No one will think you are traitors. Barker, may the gods bless you with everything. Spartacus, have you forgotten? We no longer believe in the gods. What we believe in now is freedom. Barker laughed loudly, waved his hand, and led the people who followed him to live in seclusion, to leave the abandoned manor. As these people left, the surroundings suddenly became much quieter. Xia Changqing took a deep breath and came to Spartacus. There is no banquet that will not end. Spartacus, Vero, Docket, we say goodbye. Xia Changqing held the long sword at his waist. It was time for him to leave. He was going to embark on a more difficult road. Xia, can't you not leave? Vero suddenly became sad, and he was reluctant to leave. Xia Changqing shook his head and went forward to hug Vero. After all, the three of them had the best relationship in the training ground. Vero, I have my own way to go. Don't worry, we will meet again, if we are destined to. Xia Changqing let Vero go and pounded his chest. You should also remember to reunite with your wife and son as soon as possible. In fact, Xia Changqing hated this kind of sad emotion at parting, so he simply stopped talking and nodded to the three people. Xia Changqing resolutely turned around and strode away. Capua is located in the geographical location of Italy in later generations, not far from the Mediterranean coastline. And Xia Changqing's goal is also the sea. The sea is a lawless place. The sea is vast and endless. Even the Romans are not very powerful on the sea. The sea is a paradise for pirates, and pirates are a group of lawless people. The rules to be a pirate are also very simple. Whoever has a hard fist will be obeyed, and Xia Changqing happened to think that his fist was hard enough. Chapter 84 Pirates. When the rainy season came, it rained heavily, making the roads muddy. Although the sewer system in Rome during this period was already very complete, it was not good for the city. Xia Changqing, who was rushing in the wild, suffered from the ravages of rain, which made him very irritable. At this time, there were still people who wanted to rob him. Facts have proved that promising professions such as robbers and bandits can always be seen in ancient and modern times, at any time and anywhere. Xia Changqing was ecstatic. Under his influence, the kind robbers took him to their base. Although it was just some simple looking wooden houses, it was always a place that could shelter from the wind and rain. Under Xia Changqing's patient influence, the robbers pointed him to the road to the seaside. This was really a difficult thing to say, and Xia Changqing was a little lost. Fortunately, with the help of these kind people, Xia Changqing came to the seaside smoothly. Pirate activities in the Mediterranean are very rampant. Many people are fishermen on weekdays, and they are also working as pirates in secret. But this is not what Xia Changqing wants. He is looking for people who take piracy as their main job, not these part-time fishermen. After spending a lot of effort, Xia Changqing finally found the trace of pirates. Although pirates are a group of people who make a living on the sea, they also need to go ashore, deal with the looted materials, and need to be supplied. Pirates have this need, so there are naturally places for them to deal with these things. When Xia Changqing stepped into this nameless town not far from the sea, he knew he had found the right place. The nameless town really has no name. It is not recognized by the Roman Republic, and is completely a lawless place. After entering the town, Xia Changqing found that most of the people walking on the street were carrying knives and swords, with fierce faces, and they were not good people at first glance. A handsome guy like Xia Changqing, with a handsome face and exotic face, is destined to be incompatible with these people. So Xia Changqing just entered the town, and he found that he was followed by a tail. Xia Changqing's expression did not change. He wandered around the town for a long time, as if he was having fun. It was not until the tail behind him lost his patience and jumped out, that Xia Changqing stopped. This was a narrow alley with no one around. Xia Changqing walked here on purpose. He adjusted the long sword hanging on his waist, and looked at the people blocking him with interest. With a slight movement of his eyes, Xia Changqing had already noticed that someone was blocking him behind him. "Who are you?" Xia Changqing's tone contained expectation, hoping that these two people could give him a surprise. "It's none of your business who we are. Boy, I see that your face is unfamiliar. Where are you from?" "Well, I'm a big man from the east. It's indeed my first time here today. By the way, can you tell me where this place is?" Xia Changqing acted like a rookie who had just come out of the woodwork. The meaning of his words was very clear. He was not a local. He had just come here today, and was a real fat sheep. Sure enough, the two lawless element who attacked Xia Changqing from front and back showed malicious grins on their faces. "Boy, didn't your parents tell you not to run around?" Both of them were holding short swords, and they didn't take Xia Changqing seriously at all. "Nalace, why does this boy look like a noble? If this boy with an exotic appearance is sold as a slave, he will definitely be a hot commodity." Hearing this, Xia Changqing was unhappy. "You are the hot commodity, and your whole family is hot commodity. So, you are slave traders?" "No, we are pirates. This is a paradise for pirates. Boy, you are unlucky to meet us two brothers." Xia Changqing felt sick in his heart. He originally wanted to deal with the two people and find out more information. Now, he can only say that it is unlucky for both of them to meet him. Swish. There was a light sound, a flash of sword light, bright and dazzling. The pirates were distracted, their eyes were confused, and they seemed to have forgotten to dodge. "Nalace. Damn, what did you do to Nalace?" The pirate behind Xia Changqing didn't see clearly what happened, but he saw Xia Changqing draw his sword. The exasperated pirate ran towards Xia Changqing with a dagger in hand. "Don't move." Xia Changqing's cold voice sounded, and the pirate's body froze in place. He widened his eyes in disbelief. In fact, he didn't even see how Xia Changqing drew his sword, and he felt a chill on his neck, which made him dare not move. His lips moved, and the pirate wanted to ask his companion what happened, but the next moment, his eyes widened. After the pirate's sight passed Xia Changqing, it fell on his companion. In his opinion, Nalace seemed to be stupid, standing there stupidly. At this moment, a breeze blew by, and Nalace fell backwards on his back. You killed him," the pirate said tremblingly. Killing people was already a common thing for pirates like him, but this way of killing people without anyone noticing scared the pirate. "Isn't this obvious?" Xia Changqing shrugged and said indifferently, "Okay, Mr. Pirate, can we talk calmly now?" "Of course, as you wish, sir. You can ask me anything. Magnus knows everything." The pirate pulled an ugly smile at the corner of his mouth, fearing that Xia Changqing's hand would shake and cut off his neck with a sword. "Don't be nervous, Mr. Magnus. I just have a question to ask you." "Please go ahead." Magnus nodded fiercely like a chicken. "Are your pirate sentry standards strict?" Xia Changqing asked seriously. "What?" Magnus looked at Xia Changqing blankly, and didn't react to what Xia Changqing meant at first. I mean, do you think someone like me can become a pirate like you? Pirate? Don't be kidding, sir. You are teasing me, right? Huh. Xia Changqing's face was serious. Who do you think you are? Do I need to tease you? No, I was just teasing you. You can become a powerful pirate. Even our captain can't compare with you. I like to hear that. Now tell me everything about you. Xia Changqing looked ferocious as he threatened the poor pirate. Chapter 85 Call Me Captain. The dark alleys, which had been deserted for a long time, gave Xia Changqing enough time to get to know his new pirate friends in depth. The pirate named Magnus succumbed helplessly to Xia Changqing's tyranny and told him everything about himself. The pirate group he belonged to only had 3 small boats, and all the pirates together only had about 30 people. They were not capable of robbing powerful merchant fleets, and could only rob fishermen and small merchants along the Mediterranean coastline. In general, they were a group of small characters who bullied the weak and feared the strong. This was really to Xia Changqing's liking. He was also afraid that these pirates were hard bones who were not afraid of death, so his process of getting promoted would definitely be difficult. Now, after listening to Magnus's words, Xia Changqing was completely relieved. Under Xia Changqing's threat, Magnus had a sad face and reluctantly took him to the gathering place of pirates. Small pirates like them were all about living a happy life. After robbing and getting some money, they would go ashore and spend it all. After squandering the wealth from the last robbery, these pirates will go out to sea again. Magnus and the dead extra came to the nameless town with some money to have fun. They had already spent all their money in the brothel. Because of this, the 2 people targeted the unfamiliar Xia Changqing, wanting to get another fortune from him. Unfortunately, the boat capsized in the gutter, and the 2 were intercepted by Xia Changqing. The bodies of the dead pirates were thrown on the spot. In such an illegal place, it is normal for people to die. After everything on the body is looted, someone will naturally throw the body into the sewer. Magnus took Xia Changqing through the alleys, through the nameless town, and headed to the port on the seaside. It is called a port, but it is just a messy port with stones piled up randomly on the shallow beach by the sea, which can only allow small ships with shallow draft to dock. And the 3 small single-sail ships of Magnus's pirate group are docked here. On the coast, there are tents built with canvas. Every time a ship docks, there will be people staying here. After all, the ship is the most important property of these pirates. If it is secretly taken away, they will have nowhere to cry. At this time, there are already more than 10 pirates who have returned to the tent camp. They are gathered together idly. In the open space in the middle of the crowd, 2 strong men are fighting. Cheers continue to ring out for the arrival of Magnus and Xia Changqing. No one asked for a while. There are also pirates who saw the arrival of the 2 people, but he just glanced at them and turned back to stare at the center of the venue. Magnus smiled bitterly at Xia Changqing embarrassedly. What a mob. Xia Changqing has already defined these pirates in his heart. No one asked about the strangers who came to the camp. Where is your captain? Xia Changqing asked Magnus. As the captain, he should be the most powerful one among these pirates. Xia Changqing wants to see his quality first. Magnus gave a bitter smile. He had seen the speed of Xia Changqing's sword. Before he was sure of escaping, he didn't dare to act rashly. These damn pirates, didn't they see that they were being held hostage? Magnus cursed his companions in his heart. Hey, where is the captain? Magnus said in a bad tone. Go get angry. Pay attention to me. Pay attention to me. Pay attention to me quickly. Magnus roared in his heart. However, after hearing Magnus's question, Wood just glanced at him and pointed to the middle of the camp. Magnus was disappointed. He glanced at Xia Changqing, smiled and was cautious, not daring to act too rashly. Xia Changqing was behind the pirate, pushed his back, and motioned him to lead the way. Magnus had no choice but to greet the women of Wit's family in his heart, but his body honestly took Xia Changqing to the tent, where the captain was. Captain? Magnus lifted the curtain and walked into the tent. Magnus, what do you want to talk to me about? The captain mentioned by the little pirate was a middle-aged man between 30 and 40 years old, with a rough face and a full beard. He looked like he was not easy to mess with. After hearing Magnus's shout, he raised his head from behind the desk, first glanced at Magnus, and then immediately set his sights on Xia Changqing. Magnus, can you introduce me to this friend? Oh, okay, this is. Magnus' voice suddenly got stuck, and he remembered that until now, he still didn't know who the person who threatened him was. Excuse me, please allow me to introduce myself. My name is Xia, from the east. Magnus felt a little headache. He looked at the polite Xia Changqing, and wondered in his heart, was this person still the one who had just put a sword on his neck to threaten him? Yes, this is Xia. He is here. He is here to join us. The captain stared at Magnus with wide eyes, with an expression that said, are you kidding me? No, no, no. Xia Changqing spoke at this time. To be precise, I'm here to be your new captain. To be honest, your current life is too shabby. I'm confident that I can bring you a better life. Magnus now just wanted to run away. The captain must be angry. This kid is finished. Will the captain blame me afterwards? I have to think about how to explain. No one paid attention to Magnus, who was in a state of intense psychological fluctuation. After hearing Xia Changqing's arrogant words, the smile on the captain's face disappeared. Friend, are you joking? No, not at all. Xia Changqing spread his hands, indicating that he was very serious about this matter. Are you looking for death? The captain grinned. A man who can become a pirate captain, no matter how gentle he pretends to be on the surface, still hides cruelty and cold-bloodedness in his bones. Grabbing the dagger leaning on the table, the captain slashed at Xia Changqing without saying a word. Die, die. Magnus knew that this battle was inevitable, so he took the opportunity to duck out of the tent. The captain alone might not be a match, but there were more than a dozen of their brothers in the camp. Xia Changqing caught a glimpse of Magnus sneaking away from the corner of his eye, but he didn't care too much. They were just a bunch of rabble, and he was confident that he wouldn't capsize in the ditch. Chapter 86, Subjugating Pirates. Seeing that the dagger was still a few centimeters away from his head, Xia Changqing finally made a move. He tilted his head slightly and leaned sideways, easily dodging the sword. Xia Changqing stretched out his right hand, grasped the hilt of the sword, and Winter was instantly unsheathed. At this time, the captain had just put away his sword, and Winter had already arrived and hovered above his head. The captain did not dare to move again. He looked at Xia Changqing with a dull look, and there was only one thought in his mind. What a fast sword. Dang. The dagger fell to the ground, and the captain raised his hands to indicate that he would not resist anymore. Friend, let's talk it over. Xia Changqing sighed. He was originally talking in a nice way, so why did he have to force him to draw his sword? Captain, can you tell me your name? Of course, Bertus, a Gaul. The captain answered very happily. Very good, Bertus, can I call you that? Bertus swallowed his saliva, glanced at the cold Winter, and quickly replied, you are welcome. Xia Changqing nodded with satisfaction. He took back the Winter and asked again, do you think I can be your new captain now? Of course. Bertus agreed very happily. A good man would not suffer a loss in front of him, so he fooled around first. Suddenly, Xia Changqing's face moved slightly. He had sensed that the pirates outside the tent had gathered and were coming here with weapons. Bertus, let's go out and announce it together. Xia Changqing said to the former captain. Okay, no problem. Bertus was eager to leave this damn tent as soon as possible. He rushed out before Xia Changqing urged him. Xia Changqing chuckled and didn't care. He knew very well that, although these pirates were a mob, they would not easily surrender to a stranger. If they wanted to be convinced, they could only rely on fists to beat them. So after seeing Bertus running out, Xia Changqing was not in a hurry and followed him with unusual ease. As Xia Changqing expected, when he opened the door curtain and walked out, the pirates had already surrounded him with their teeth bared, and Bertus had already run into the group of pirates. Xia Changqing sighed slowly and looked at Bertus with great disappointment. Bertus, are you not going to abide by our agreement? I will obey your mother. Bertus pointed at Xia Changqing and shouted loudly, kill him for me. The pirates looked at each other and rushed towards Xia Changqing with loud shouts. A moment later, there were pirates lying on the ground around Xia Changqing, and their wailing echoed in the air, making people upset. Shut up. Xia Changqing shouted softly, and in an instant, the surroundings became silent, as if a movie was suddenly muted. Xia Changqing nodded in satisfaction. holding Winter in his hand and coming to Bertus' side. Before he could continue to ask questions, Bertus shouted, "Captain, you are our new captain." Xia Changqing heard this and turned to look at the other pirates lying on the ground. The pirates were also very sensible. "Yes, that's right. You are our captain. Captain." Listening to the captain's voice constantly coming from his ears, Xia Changqing was satisfied. His face became serious, and he raised his Winter. In the frightened eyes of the pirates, he stretched out his hand and touched the sword. Suddenly, a flash of fire suddenly appeared, and flames burned on Winter's sword. "Oh my god. What happened? Gods, his sword is on fire." "Shut up, we all saw it. Is this the god of fire performing a miracle?" Xia Changqing was very satisfied with the pirates' performance. If he had just used force to subdue them, some people might not be willing, but with a hint of mystery and the possibility of involving gods, it would be easy to bluff these pirates. "As you can see," Xia Changqing said loudly, and the pirates no longer made any extra moves. They looked at Xia Changqing with awe and curiosity, as if they were listening to an oracle. "This is a gift from the god of fire. As long as you are loyal to me, I can also give you the power of fire, so that you can be invincible in battle. And if someone is half-hearted and intends to betray, then he will be burned to death by the flames, and his soul will also be burned by the flames after death." Hearing this, the pirates' breathing stagnated. What they cared about was that they could also get the power of fire, which was really too attractive to their minds. During this period, belief in gods was very common. Whether Romans or not, everyone had their own gods. No one thought that gods were false. Praise the god of fire. Praise Captain Xia. Magnus' eyes turned, and he suddenly shouted loudly. After noticing the approving look from Xia Changqing, Magnus' heart instantly became excited. He could already imagine himself being blessed by Captain Xia, holding a burning weapon, and killing people everywhere. Now, their captain is Captain Xia. If anyone dares to say it's not, don't blame him, Magnus, for fighting desperately. Praise the god of fire. Praise Captain Xia. The pirates cheered. They were now very sure that under the leadership of Captain Xia, their lives would definitely change dramatically. As for Bertus, who was that? They only recognized Captain Xia. After subduing the pirates present, the next thing became very smooth. When the crew members who went ashore to have fun returned one after another, they were shocked to find that their hometown had been stolen, and even the captain had been replaced. What's even more outrageous is that most of the crew members have surrendered to the new captain. Even the original captain, Bertus, followed the new captain happily. Because a crew member who had just returned called Bertus captain, Bertus got angry on the spot, scolded the other party severely, and warned the poor pirate. There is only one captain, that is the great Captain Xia. Things are sometimes so simple. Xia Changqing easily gained a group of men, and had 3 ships under his command. Although these ships are just some small boats about 10 meters long, they only have one mast, which seems too shabby. But everything is difficult at the beginning, and no one can predict how it will develop in the future. A few days later, all the crew members had returned, and Xia Changqing, at the strong request of the new crew members, appropriately demonstrated the miracle of setting the long sword on fire, which caused another cheer from the crowd. It's time to go to sea. Chapter 87. 2 years. 2 years have passed since Xia Changqing subdued some of the small pirates. In 2 years, the news of the Spartacus uprising has spread throughout the entire Italian peninsula, and Xia Changqing can hear the legend of Spartacus from time to time at sea. Although the course of history has taken some turns, the things that should have happened again due to various coincidences. Destroyed the Colosseum of Capua, defeated Greba who caused all these evil consequences, and gathered on Mount Suvavi. The scale of the slave uprising army led by Spartacus has become a behemoth to this day, making the Roman Senate anxious. When the Roman authorities focused their attention on Spartacus, no one noticed that another behemoth had quietly appeared in the Mediterranean. Somewhere on the surface of the Mediterranean, large and small ships are lying together. This era is still in the era of cold weapon warfare, but don't underestimate the wisdom of the ancient people. All pirate ships, big and small, were equipped with catapults. These catapults, which could launch burning pottery jars, were equivalent to the artillery of later generations. Before the battle, the pirates were accustomed to firing a few shots. On the sea, the pirate flag fluttered in the wind, and the shouts of killing shook the sky. The battle started quickly, and ended very quickly. Captain, the other side has surrendered. How should these people be dealt with? Please give me your instructions. Standing at the bow, Xia Changqing, who seemed to be in deep thought, came back to his senses after hearing the report from his subordinates. Follow the old rules. Yes, Captain. Bertus replied with a fanatical look. 2 years have passed. The little pirate who could only lead dozens of people to rob fishermen can now command more than 10 pirate ships alone. The black pirate flag flying high, with a flaming sword in the mouth of a skull, represents the invincible king of the Mediterranean. The captain has ordered us to follow the old rules. Be grateful, you who are supposed to die. Thank the great and kind Captain Xia, because it is because of his kindness that you have a chance to survive. After sending Bertus away, Xia Changqing returned to his captain's room. After 2 years of development, he has become the most powerful pirate in the Mediterranean. And among the pirates, his title of the King of the Mediterranean is also vaguely circulated. Xia Changqing knew that this was not a good thing. If it weren't for the fact that Spartacus's slave uprising army completely attracted the attention of the Senate of the Roman Republic, he would have been targeted by the Romans long ago. Looking at the latest intelligence in his hand, Spartacus has led his men to capture the city of Xia. After he secretly returned to southern Italy from the Alps, Xia Changqing knew that Spartacus had embarked on the old path destined by history. After thinking for a moment in the captain's room, Xia Changqing shouted, "Come here." A guard immediately came in from outside the door. "Captain, what do you want?" "Go and inform Bertus to clean up the battlefield as soon as possible. We are going back." "Return." "Captain, where is our target this time?" Hearing the guard's question, Xia Changqing's eyes were deep, as if he had crossed time and space, and looked at a city on the Italian peninsula. The target is the city of Xia. The city of Xia. This has become the base of the rebels. The city is completely controlled by the rebels. During this period of time, slaves, gladiators, and bankrupt farmers have continuously joined it. The scale of the entire rebel army has expanded to 100,000. 2 years ago, Spartacus could never have imagined that he would one day decide the life and death of hundreds of thousands of people. This put Spartacus under great pressure. Although the rebels have now captured the city of Xia, the Senate has also sent Crassus to conquer it. Although the city of Xia is good, it is not a place to stay for a long time. One day, Spartacus suddenly received a report that a group of strangers came to the city gate and wanted to see him, and the other party was not Roman. Spartacus climbed up the tower with doubts in his heart. At a glance, he saw the young man standing at the front of the team outside the city. The young man had a handsome face, wearing black leather armor and a sword on his waist. The sword was much longer than the swords they used. After 2 years of not seeing each other, Spartacus couldn't believe that he could see Xia Changqing again here. Spartacus immediately ordered the city gate to be opened and hurried out of the city to meet him. Xia, looking at the face that had not changed at all, Spartacus hugged him tightly. "Long time no see, Spartacus." "Xia, I thought you went back to the east. I didn't expect to see you again." After a long separation, Spartacus seemed to have countless words to say to Xia Changqing. Xia Changqing followed Spartacus into the city of Xia. He unexpectedly found that the atmosphere in the city was quite peaceful. There were still Romans walking on the streets. It can be seen that Spartacus listened to his advice and did not kill all the Romans. Vero, who had just arrived in the city, rushed over impatiently after receiving the news. The 3 people who had formed a deep friendship in the Basiatus training ground finally got together again. Vero couldn't wait to tell Xia Changqing how they had destroyed the arena of Capua and how they defeated Grabber in the past 2 years. Xia Changqing listened with a smile, and then Vero asked Xia Changqing what he had been doing in the past 2 years. Xia Changqing also talked about his experience in the past 2 years in a roundabout way. When Vero and Spartacus heard that Xia Changqing had become a famous pirate in the Mediterranean, they looked at each other with incredible expressions. The rebels were developing, and Xia Changqing was not idle either. Spartacus was full of emotion for a while, and then he mentioned to Xia Changqing the difficulties the rebels were facing. Crassus's army was eyeing them and could launch an attack at any time, and Crassus also cut off their escape route to northern Italy, and they had nowhere to go now. Spartacus, don't worry too much. Since you can't go north, why don't you go south? Go south. Where can we go? If we go further south, we will reach the Mediterranean. Spartacus just said this and immediately realized something. He said with surprise, Xia, what do you mean? That's right. Xia Changqing smiled and pointed to the south. After crossing the Mediterranean, you have many places to go. Chapter 88 Heading South. Spartacus, I have hundreds of pirate ships, enough to transport all the rebels to Sicily. You can stay on the island. Even Crassus will not be able to do anything to you for a while. Xia Changqing pointed to the south and gave Spartacus some advice. Even if you don't want to stay in Sicily for a long time, the Mediterranean is very vast. You can go south by boat. You can reach Egypt in the south. Even if you go north, you can bypass Rome on the sea and go directly to Gaul. Xia Changqing believed that, as long as they were at sea, the rebels would have many options. Even if they wanted to avoid the Roman army, they could directly cross the Mediterranean and go to the African continent. Unless Spartacus didn't want to leave the Italian peninsula, Xia Changqing would have no choice. However, as Xia Changqing expected, Spartacus decided to follow his advice after a brief thought. All the rebels took ships to Sicily. Xia Changqing subdued so many pirates and even became the pirate king in the Mediterranean for this moment. It has nothing to do with interests. This is the friendship between men. After reaching an agreement with Spartacus, Xia Changqing left the city of Seleucia and began to gather all his men and pirate ships. Proud of Xia Changqing's reputation over a long period of time, no pirate questioned the use of pirate ships to transport the rebels. Among the pirate groups, countless pirates were completely loyal to Xia Changqing. Although pirates were villains who were accustomed to betrayal, facing the messenger of the god of fire and the pirate king of the Mediterranean, the pirates regarded him as a god. Countless ships gathered on the sea near the city of Seleucia, and the transfer of the rebels began smoothly. However, Crassus had already planted spies in the city of Seleucia, and Crassus learned about the transfer of the rebels as soon as they began. Crassus's army began to move forward, forcing Spartacus to take the initiative to fight. In order to allow most of the rebels to evacuate smoothly, Spartacus had to organize people to stay and defend. Crassus knew that this might be the last chance to destroy the Spartacus rebels. If the rebels really reached the sea, they might have unlimited possibilities. The two sides arranged their positions and prepared for the final decisive battle. Crassus wanted to destroy the rebels here at all costs, and Spartacus was determined to defend the line of defense and cover the evacuation of most people. The battle was imminent. As for the Roman regular army, they lined up in neat rows, obeyed orders, and advanced steadily. The rebels had uneven equipment and the battle teams were loose. Spartacus did not train them well at all, and had no intention of cooperating. Of course, now is not the time to discuss these things. Crassus was anxious, because if he delayed a little time, the number of rebels on board would increase. Therefore, Crassus ordered the Roman army to take the lead in the attack. The soldiers put their shields in front of them and advanced the overall formation little by little. The rebels also began to make noises here, all eager to try and rush up to kill. However, the current situation is different from the past. The purpose of the rebels is not to defeat Crassus' army, but to delay time. Spartacus did not order an attack immediately. He was waiting for Xia Changqing's action. Xia Changqing was standing on the deck of a warship at this time. At the bow, there was a huge catapult that looked like an enlarged version of a crossbow. It was already loaded with a pottery jar filled with kerosene. Xia Changqing narrowed his eyes and calculated the distance the Roman army had advanced. After estimating that the other side was within the range, Xia Changqing waved his hand and ordered an attack. The pirates received the order, lit the pottery jar, and fired the catapult. One by one, the fireballs drew a beautiful arc from the air and smashed into the ranks of the Roman soldiers. Although the Roman soldiers put up shields on their heads at the first time, the pottery jars themselves were not very hard. After touching the shields, they shattered one after another, and the kerosene spilled directly into a large area, and then burned violently under the action of a small spark. The Roman soldiers who were accidentally hit turned into firemen one after another, and then affected the people around them. The originally tight and compact formation was suddenly broken, and the Roman soldiers in the front row who heard the commotion in the back began to move slowly. Attack. Spartacus gave the order at the right time, and the rebels immediately rushed towards the Roman soldiers' positions like beasts out of the cage. The fierce fighting began, and neither side was willing to give in. The people fighting in the front kept dying, and the people in the back filled in directly. The entire battlefield was like a meat grinder, constantly devouring the lives of mortals. The battle lasted from day to night. Under the rebellion of the rebels, who were brave and fearless, Crassus finally chose to retreat. He couldn't fill all his troops here. As a big slave owner, Crassus always wanted to enter the Senate, so he deeply knew what it meant to have troops in his hands. Crassus retreated, and the rebels won again. Although they themselves suffered heavy casualties, most of them had boarded the pirate ship. These people are the seeds of freedom. As long as the seeds are still there, the spirit of freedom will never be extinguished. Without time to collect the bodies of his dead brothers, Spartacus, who was at the rear, hurriedly boarded the pirate ship. He bid farewell to the fighters who sacrificed their lives for freedom with tears in his eyes, and sailed to Sicily with freedom and hope. As an island, Sicily itself was not very valued by Rome, and the resistance on the island collapsed at the touch of a button. Spartacus led the rebels to Sicily, a land full of freedom. Everyone knew that Rome's revenge would definitely follow, but at least now they had escaped from the cage and there were many options for the rebels to choose from. Xia Changqing, who saved the rebels and Spartacus, finally fulfilled his friendship with Spartacus, and he could leave this world with peace of mind. As for what happened next, Xia Changqing was not a saint, and he did not have the ability to bring a stable environment to the rebels. Whether the rebels would be eliminated in the future or find a paradise on Earth was none of Xia Changqing's business. Afterwards, Xia Changqing gave all the ships and men he had accumulated over the past 2 years to Spartacus. Although the pirates were a bunch of unruly bastards, Xia Changqing believed that Spartacus could subdue them. After all, his name was Spartacus. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 89. Professor, do you hate bugs? American New York, Brooklyn. Night has fallen, and the city is still brightly lit and bustling with traffic. However, in this remote place, under the dim street lights, there are not many pedestrians. Therefore, Xia Changqing's sudden arrival did not seem too abrupt, nor did it cause any commotion. The breath of modern life was overwhelming. If there was no systematic introduction, Xia Changqing would have thought that he had returned to the original Earth. But he is now in New York, and this world is not as peaceful as he imagined. Blood Clan. This is the name of this world. Xia Changqing vaguely remembers that the Blood Clan in this world is not a vampire who likes to talk about love with human girls, but a real disgusting monster. The birth of the Blood Clan, according to legend, was a fallen angel who was killed by God and his body was divided into 7 pieces and buried all over the world. As time went by, the blood of the fallen angel soaked the soil, and 7 worms grew out of the soil, and then the worms parasitized the human body. This is the birth of the ancestor of the Blood Clan. It was a very absurd story. The ancestors of the Blood Clan were actually a few worms, and it was a worm that almost wiped out the entire human race. There were 7 ancestors of the Blood Clan, and the youngest one was the biggest villain in this world, the Blood Ancestor. He not only wanted to control the entire human world, but also hunted other ancestors. Although the ancestors of the Blood Clan were essentially just worms, the source of their power was the soil, where they were born. Therefore, if you want to completely eliminate an ancestor, you must pollute and destroy the soil, where they were born. This is the origin of the Blood Ancestor. Thinking of this, Xia Changqing's mind appeared the disgusting appearance of worms. He hated worms. What surprised Xia Changqing even more was that, after coming to this world, the system did not assign him any tasks, but he could leave on his own once the time he stayed in this world was up. It seemed that he did not have to be an enemy of the blood ancestor, as long as he stayed there. This thought flashed through Xia Changqing's mind, but as soon as this thought emerged, he was quickly dispelled. Not to mention, that he is now in New York, the beginning of all events, the center of the storm. Unless he leaves here immediately and runs to a remote countryside, he will not be able to escape this storm. And Xia Changqing does not intend to escape. He can escape from one world, two worlds, but it is impossible to escape from all worlds. The process of walking through the heavens is a process of strengthening oneself. If he only thinks about escaping, he will die in a certain world one day. Xia Changqing already has a strong belief belonging to a warrior. Holding the long sword hanging on his waist, Xia Changqing looked around. When he saw an antique shop on the corner opposite him, he was moved and walked towards the antique shop. Ding-ling-ling, the bell driven by the door made a crisp and pleasant sound, which attracted the attention of the boss who was watching TV. Xia Changqing looked around. This is a very retro shop, with all kinds of old-fashioned ornaments, wall clocks, and crafts. Being in it, it seems to have come to the last century. However, what was more surprising was the owner of this shop. Abraham Satrakian raised his head. Although he was already over 90 years old, his eyes were not blurry. The young man with an Asian face in front of him seemed out of tune with this world. His body was full of tight and powerful muscles, wrapped in a black leather armor. His face was firm, and his eyes were full of curiosity. The most eye-catching thing was that he had a 3-finger wide long sword hanging on his waist. His eyes were moving. The old man was already full of curiosity about this young man. It was already 2014, and there were still people wearing such retro clothes. Abraham still had some eyesight. He was very sure that the sword was not a decoration, but a real killing weapon. Young man, if you want to buy something, just look at it, Abraham said slowly, and his performance was no different from that of an old man who was about to die. Xia Changqing turned his eyes from the shelf to the old man. Old man, you are so old, and you still work hard to run a shop. No way, no matter how old you are, you still need to eat. Abraham laughed. Don't you have family? At your age, it's enough to enjoy your old age and play with your grandchildren. Why do you have to work so hard? Xia Changqing held the sword with one hand while continuing to look at the furnishings in the shop and chatting casually. A trace of sadness flashed across Abraham's face, and he smiled bitterly. My family has passed away a long time ago, and I'm old. I don't know when I will go to see them. Oh. Xia Changqing turned his eyes back and looked at the old man with a smile. You can't leave the world so soon. The world still needs you to continue fighting. The old man frowned and looked at the young man thoughtfully. What do you mean? Professor Abraham, don't you know that you hate insects? As soon as Xia Changqing finished speaking, Abraham's face immediately became serious, and his eyes were full of vigilance. I don't understand what you are talking about. If you don't need anything, please leave my shop. I'm closing. No, no, no. Professor, Xia Changqing shouted immediately. I mean no harm. Xia Changqing spread his hands. If he was kicked out now, he would really be homeless. Modern society is not like ancient times. As long as you have money, you can go anywhere. Modern times are an information society. People like Xia Changqing who have no identity documents and no money on them may be caught by patrolling police when they wander the streets. It's unknown when the blood ancestor will come to New York. If he is locked up by the police, it will be a lot of fun. So Xia Changqing's best choice now is to stay in this store. Abraham has been fighting with the blood ancestor for a lifetime, and he might, maybe, accept him. Professor Abraham Satrakian, I know who you are. We have the same goal. The blood ancestor is about to return. In this city, only the two of us know what the blood ancestor represents. The name of the blood ancestor made Abraham's eyes dazed for a moment, but he looked at Xia Changqing with eyes still full of vigilance. Who are you? How do you know that the blood ancestor is about to return? At the same time, Abraham had pulled out a slender sword from under the counter. Even though there was a layer of glass between them, the sword still stretched out from below, and the tip of the sword was aimed at Xia Changqing's throat. It seemed that he was going to kill Xia Changqing if they disagreed. Chapter 90 Ghost Plane. Wow. Xia Changqing took 2 steps back and said quickly, "Professor, this is not a joke. And every word I said is true. I came here to deal with the blood ancestor. You can trust me completely." However, Abraham's sword did not move at all and pointed steadily at Xia Changqing. "Why should I believe you, young man? Show me the evidence. There has been no news about the blood ancestor for many years. How do you know he is coming back?" "Professor, I came to New York because the blood ancestor is coming back. His return has become inevitable. We can only try our best to stop him. Your suspicion of me now is completely unnecessary. In a few days, you will see the news of his return on the news," Xia Changqing said earnestly, showing his true feelings. If Abraham still couldn't trust him, he would accept being on the street. After the two looked at each other for a long time, Abraham finally slowly put down the sword in his hand. He could hear that the young man in front of him was indeed not lying. This was the intuition of a 90-year-old man, and Abraham trusted his intuition very much. According to this, is the blood ancestor really going to return? I will believe you for now. No matter where you got the news about the blood ancestor, as long as you sincerely intend to deal with the blood ancestor, I will do my best to help you. Xia Changqing rubbed his hands embarrassedly and finally felt relieved. "Professor, in fact, I need your help now. You can see that I'm penniless and have nowhere to go. I can only rely on you to take me in." Abraham put the sword back under the counter and said unhappily, "I don't have the habit of taking in strangers. Professor Abraham, let me introduce myself again. My name is Xia Changqing, from China. You can call me Xia. Do we know each other now?" After Xia Changqing introduced himself, he wandered around the store, looking around. "Professor, where do I stay tonight?" Xia Changqing didn't have any embarrassed thoughts. He smiled and approached the old man. "Also, do you have any food here? I'm a little hungry." To be honest, in front of a 90-year-old man, Xia Changqing was like a child, and he didn't mind showing his lively side. Abraham looked at Xia Changqing, who was very familiar with him. He looked serious on the surface, but a barely noticeable smile flashed across his lips. For many years, his store has not been so lively. If his children were still alive, his great-grandson would probably be as old as this young man. Abraham thought with some nostalgia. Under Xia Changqing's shameless behavior, he successfully got Abraham's shelter and did not end up on the streets. The next day, after having a meal in the antique shop, Abraham went out and bought Xia Changqing a set of clothes that were in line with this era. Xia Changqing was not embarrassed at all. For old man Abraham, killing the blood ancestor was the best reward for him. Then for the whole day, Abraham stayed by the TV, paying attention to every piece of news on TV. The whole day was calm, and nothing unusual happened in the city. Abraham asked Xia Changqing where he got the news of the return of the blood ancestor. Xia Changqing lay on Abraham's recliner, leisurely. He was impatient with the questioning, and said that he learned it through witchcraft divination. Then something happened that made Xia Changqing regret it. Old man Abraham began to ask about witchcraft divination. He and the blood ancestor have been fighting each other for so many years. Apart from the blood clan, he has never seen other mysterious people. The witchcraft in Xia Changqing's mouth greatly aroused the curiosity of the old man. At the same time, a Boeing plane full of passengers took off from Berlin, Germany, and its destination was New York, America. No one knew that this plane was not only full of passengers, but also brought the blood ancestor. Time flies, and a day has passed in a blink of an eye. Abraham stood up from the TV and slowly moved his slightly stiff waist. For a whole day, he did not get any news about the blood ancestor from the news. However, Abraham did not intend to drive Xia Changqing away. With the company of this young man, Abraham felt younger, which was not a bad feeling. At this time, at New York International Airport, the ground control center lost contact with a Boeing plane from Germany. The plane successfully landed at the airport, but no matter how it was called, no response was received. The person in charge realized that something big had happened. The plane seemed to have become a ghost plane, which was chilling. After calling the police quickly surrounded the scene. The whole plane was quietly parked on the ground, the engine was turned off, and no lights were even revealed, like an unmanned aircraft. However, the person in charge knew that the plane was full of more than 200 passengers. If all these passengers died in it, it would be a big deal. No one knew what happened. The police, FBI, and reporters quickly surrounded the place, and the whole plane was protected until members of the CDC arrived at the scene. Before that, they had detected through instruments that all passengers were still in the cabin, but there were no signs of life. Ephraim Goodwinzer, the chief medical officer of the CDC, decided to take his assistant to the cabin to find out what was going on. In an antique shop in Brooklyn, Xia Changqing had just helped Abraham solve a robbery when the TV showed what was happening at the international airport. Ignoring the two hooligans who were fleeing in a panic, Xia Changqing quickly called the old man over. "Professor, come and watch the news. We are in big trouble." The old man turned around and watched the screen on TV quietly. He knew in his heart that the passengers on the entire plane had been infected by the blood ancestor. The prediction of the Oriental boy came true. "Boy, we are really in big trouble. He is really back," Professor Abraham said. "We have to stop this disaster from spreading. Follow me, boy." The professor walked to a closet and slowly pushed it open, revealing a dark passage. Obviously, behind the closet was a secret room. Xia Changqing's eyes flashed, and he followed the old man into the secret room. After entering the secret room, he first set his eyes on a glass bottle on the table. In the bottle was a human heart soaked in water. Chapter 91. This boy's not worth planning with. "Professor, I have to say, your taste is really unique." Xia Changqing certainly knew that the human heart in the bottle should be the heart of Abraham's wife who died when he was young. But this act of preserving the heart made Xia Changqing disagree. However, he also understood the reason why Abraham did this. It was because of the worm in the heart that Abraham had the opportunity to extract white blood and survive until now. The hatred of the old man for the blood ancestor in his heart supported him to live until now. That's right, the white blood extracted from the worm has the effect of prolonging life. After all, the blood ancestor is essentially a worm that has obtained the blood of a fallen angel and thus gained immortality. Although other parasites derived from him do not have the effect of making people immortal, they can also allow short-lived humans to prolong their lives. Mortals who are personally given white blood by the blood ancestor can be transformed into the second generation of blood ancestors, retain their own thoughts, and gain immortality, but they must remain forever loyal to the blood ancestor. Humans are always powerless in the face of the temptation of immortality. However, this method of immortality is nothing but self-deception. The reason why humans who were given white blood by the blood ancestor can maintain their original thoughts is because bugs can maintain their thoughts. In essence, immortal people are nothing more than bugs with the original human thoughts. How sad. Back to the point, Abraham noticed Xia Changqing's eyes. He sighed and sat on the chair. "I have silver weapons here. Do you want to pick two? We have to stop the blood ancestor's conspiracy." Xia Changqing looked at Abraham. The old man didn't want to explain to him the meaning of the heart in the bottle, and he didn't ask too much. After all, this was the old man's sad thing. As for weapons, Xia Changqing drew out his long sword. He knew that the Blood Clan was afraid of silver. His sword was made of Valyrian steel. Although it was not silver, it also had the effect of breaking magic. "No need, Professor. I'm more comfortable with my own weapons." Xia Changqing refused. Abraham originally opened the secret room to let Xia Changqing choose a silver sword, but he didn't expect Xia Changqing to refuse. The old man didn't say anything more. Time waits for no one. He inserted the sword into the cane and stood up. "Xia, let's go to the airport." Abraham took the lead and walked out the door with a strong and vigorous look. The two went out and got into Abraham's antique car. Fortunately, Xia Changqing recalled his driving skills in a short time and didn't make a fool of himself. The two drove to the airport. At this time, the car radio was playing things about Kennedy International Airport. "Professor, what do you think we should do after we arrive at the airport?" Xia Changqing didn't think that the two of them could solve the problem by running to the airport so recklessly. "Find their leader. It's impossible for the two of us to destroy so many bodies." "Professor, with all due respect, I don't think the airport manager will listen to our advice. They don't understand the blood race at all. They will only think we are crazy." Abraham turned to look at Xia Changqing. He knew that what Xia Changqing said was right, but he was even more unwilling to do nothing. Do your best and leave the rest to fate. Since the blood ancestor dares to announce his return to the world now, it means that he must be ready. So am I. I'm ready for a long battle. Xia Changqing's heart was filled with admiration for this old man who had fought against the blood race all his life. Midnight, Kennedy International Airport. The crowd that was originally waiting to pick up the plane now gathered together because of the plane accident, and the whole hall was noisy. Professor, wait for me here. I'll go see if I can talk to their person in charge. How about you wait for me here? Xia Changqing looked at Abraham, who was already out of breath, and took the initiative to propose. Although he had no hope for this, he still said that he would rather make a mistake than do nothing. Abraham accepted Xia Changqing's proposal. To be honest, he was indeed very old. Xia Changqing squeezed through the crowd and hid his sword in his wide cloak. He was stopped by the security personnel in front of the crowd, who had just arrived. Sir, I think. Listen to me, man. I want to meet the person in charge of the airport incident. Take me to see him about why these things happened to the plane. I know the reason. Xia Changqing said straight to the point. The security immediately hesitated. His IQ was not completely broken. At least he knew to report the matter instead of blindly blocking Xia Changqing. A man named Jin received Xia Changqing. Xia Changqing had a vague impression of this man. He seemed to play a very important supporting role in it. Before meeting Chief Medical Officer Efrain Goodwinzer, Xia Changqing finally remembered who this man was. In the original plot, it was this supporting character who ordered the truck carrying the soil of the blood ancestor to be released, allowing the soil to successfully cross the river and the blood ancestor to take root in New York. The taboo of the blood clan is that the soil of their birthplace is afraid of water places such as the ocean and rivers. This is because the fallen angel was buried in the water after being dismembered. Xia Changqing didn't understand why there was such a strange taboo, but it didn't prevent him from taking advantage of this weakness of the blood ancestor. Under Jin's leadership, Xia Changqing successfully met Efrain Goodwinzer, but before he could speak, the other party left in a hurry. Xia Changqing's heart moved, and he didn't continue to talk about the disposal of the corpses. Drive Efrain, can I know where the corpses are placed? Looking at Efrain who hurriedly left, Xia Changqing shrugged. He knew that, even if he told the other party about the disposal of the corpses, the other party would definitely not take it to heart. Thinking of this, Xia Changqing took Jin's shoulder in a familiar way. Hey, man, I think you can tell me where all those bodies are? Sir, don't you know the cause of the plane crash? Please tell me. Jin dodged Xia Changqing without moving his face and said seriously. Okay, I can only tell you, be careful of those bodies and the 4 living people. They are all sources of infection, which is more terrible than any infectious disease. 1 person spreads to 10, and 10 spreads to 100. You must be careful. Sir, you said this is an infectious disease? Do you know what infectious disease it is? Jin was not scared by Xia Changqing's deliberately low words. People who have not really seen the blood race will not understand the horror of these monsters. Bugs, Jin, be careful of bugs. Okay, now can you tell me where all those bodies are? Bugs? Sir, what bugs? Chapter 92 Achievement, Destroy the Corpse. Xia Changqing left quickly, getting rid of Jin, the clinging spirit. He thought of the surprised expression on Jin's face when he warned him not to let any vehicles go when he left. Xia Changqing didn't know if what he said was useful. It was very likely useless. After all, under the offensive of money, humans are willing to sell even their souls, not to mention a trivial release. Fortunately, he successfully learned the location of the body from Jin's mouth. Xia Changqing found Abraham again and told him the news with great regret. The head of the CDC did not believe what he said. Abraham sighed and did not force it. After all, if he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, who would believe that there would be creatures like vampires in this world? However, the two did not get discouraged. While most of the guards at the airport were entangled by the families of the accident personnel, Xia Changqing and Abraham sneaked into the autopsy site. After pushing open the door, under the bright light, there were rows of carts, and corpses were lying on the carts. This kind of weird scene, if it were an ordinary person, would have been scared to death. In fact, Xia Changqing also had a chilling feeling, especially when he knew that these corpses would soon mutate and resurrect. Professor, what should we do? Setting fire to a place like this is not a suitable thing. Xia Changqing strolled in it and couldn't help but draw out his long sword and cut off the neck of a corpse with one sword, separating its body, cutting it one by one. It was a stupid way, but there were too many corpses here, and Xia Changqing was not sure when they would be resurrected. Abraham also drew out his sword. He also knew in his heart that setting fire to such a place was not very suitable, but letting these resurrected corpses leave was not a good choice. Xia, gather all the corpses together, and we will burn them all, Abraham said coldly. At such an old age, he was not afraid of the consequences of burning the autopsy room. Professor, are you serious? Xia Changqing looked at the old man with a little surprise. He didn't expect Abraham to be so decisive. Do as I say, we don't have much time. Xia Changqing had no objection. He had always been a man of few taboos. Now that Abraham had said so, Xia Changqing followed his instructions and began to push the cart to gather the bodies together. Who's there? Ivor? Is that you? Just as Xia Changqing was pushing the cart, a voice came from inside the room. It was obvious that someone was here. Boy, go and solve this trouble. If he doesn't listen to your advice, let him have a good sleep. No problem, Professor. Xia Changqing stopped what he was doing and walked towards the person who came. Hey, who are you? Stop it. What are you doing? Anger appeared on the fat doctor's face. He looked at the two strange outsiders with weapons in their hands and thought to himself, are these two people crazy? Doctor, listen to me. Don't get excited. We are preventing a disaster from happening. Xia Changqing hurriedly explained. Of course, if he could put down the long sword in his hand, this explanation might be more convincing. I don't care who you are. I'm going to call the police. The fat doctor rolled his eyes and fainted before he finished speaking. Xia Changqing retracted his right hand and kicked the fat doctor, who fainted on the ground. He thought to himself, if it weren't for me, you would have been doomed to die tonight. He was not exaggerating. There were so many resurrected corpses at the scene. One bite from each of them was enough to eat the fat doctor alive, although the other party looked like he had a lot of meat. Turning around, Xia Changqing continued to help. Professor, it's solved. Abraham looked at the fat doctor who fainted on the ground and looked at Xia Changqing with a hint of appreciation. To deal with a person like the fat doctor who couldn't make sense, the best solution was to make him lose the ability to continue to talk. Without the interference of outsiders, the two of them didn't waste much time to gather all the corpses together. However, after confirming that there were no missed corpses, Xia Changqing and Abraham's faces looked ugly. The number of corpses here is far from enough. There must be more than 200 infected corpses on the plane, and there are only about 100 at most here. Boy, don't think too much. Take that doctor. Let's get out of here. Abraham was leaning on a cane, and although his face was ugly, he knew what he should do now. Xia Changqing took a breath, stepped forward and carried the fat doctor with disdain. On the other side, Abraham took out a lighter from his arms and lit the shroud. The flames soon burned violently, and the whole place would be burned. This was necessary, just to completely destroy these bodies. I don't know if it was because this autopsy room was too remote, or no one was willing to set foot in such a place where corpses were stored. Even after the fire started, no one noticed this situation for a long time. The automatic emergency water spray device that Abraham was worried about was not triggered. In fact, the emergency device was not triggered, but it had been destroyed by Xia Changqing with the power of shadow. After achieving their goal, the two arsonists quickly left the crime scene, and the airport staff finally took action. Of course, they did not forget a fat doctor. It may also be because Xia Changqing was too cruel. After such a long time, the fat doctor has not woken up. Xia Changqing originally wanted to ask where the other bodies were sent, but unfortunately, they couldn't leave with such a fat man. After finding a safe place, Xia Changqing threw the fat doctor down and left hurriedly with Abraham. Because of the behavior of the two people, there was another violent riot at the airport, and reporters were reporting it relentlessly. At the same time, in the Stoneheart group, the already aging Palmer also saw this scene on the news. If you trace it back to the source, the reason why the blood ancestor returned and came to New York from Berlin was because of Palmer. Because Palmer was about to die of old age, Palmer, who had a huge wealth empire, was naturally unwilling to die like this. When he was young, he knew the existence of the blood ancestor. Now under the threat of death and the temptation of eternal life, Palmer used great power to bring the blood ancestor from Berlin to New York. Everything was arranged by him. Even if he knew that the return of the blood ancestor would cause countless people to die, Palmer still did not hesitate. It was just that the content broadcast in the news now made his heart tighten. Chapter 93, Waiting for the Rabbit. How could a fire easily break out in such an important place as an airport? What's more coincidental is that the fire broke out where the bodies were stored. This was man-made. Palmer thought of this possibility at the first time. He knew very well that he was not the only one in the world who knew about the existence of the blood ancestor. The other party's posture was very clear, that is, to destroy the blood ancestor's plan. Thinking of this, Palmer answered a phone call. He wanted to bring the 4 survivors out as soon as possible. Those 4 people were originally kept to attract the attention of the media, and they were also very important sources of infection. But Palmer didn't know that, while he was trying his best to release the 4 survivors, someone was planning to take advantage of them. It was about to dawn, and soon, the internet reported that the cause of the plane crash was not due to any infectious disease, but the result of carbon monoxide leakage. Therefore, the CDC had no reason to prevent the 4 survivors from leaving. Ephraim Goodwinser pinched his brows with a headache. What happened tonight really gave him a headache. More than 100 bodies were burned, and Ivor didn't know how to explain it to the media. According to the fat doctor, someone deliberately set the fire, one old and one young, and the young man had an Asian face. This made Ivor's heart move, and he thought of the Asian young man brought by Jin. The other party seemed to have said that he knew the inside story of the outbreak. But now Dr. Ivor has no time to think about the Asian young man. He wants to keep the 4 survivors as much as possible. Outside the quarantine area, Xia Changqing was also waiting for the 4 survivors to come out. There was no other way. He couldn't rush into the quarantine area to kill the 4 people. Although the police system in this world is mostly brain dead, Xia Changqing is unwilling to offend the violent agency now that the Blood Clan chaos has not yet fully erupted. Although the behavior of waiting for the rabbit to come may seem stupid, it is the best way. Hard work pays off. When Xia Changqing was about to lose patience, he finally saw the 4 survivors walk out of the quarantine area together and planned to leave the airport. Xia Changqing opened the car door and got out of the car. "Xia, are you sure you want to do this?" Abraham asked in the driver's seat. Although he hated the blood ancestor, he had never done such a killing in the street. It can only be said that this young man is too bold. Abraham thought so in his heart. Xia Changqing turned back and smiled, not taking this action too seriously. "Don't worry, Professor, as long as you can take me away from here as soon as possible." "Okay, I'm leaving." Xia Changqing closed the car door, wrapped his windbreaker tightly, and walked quickly towards the 4 survivors. The 4 survivors didn't know if it was because of their brain damage. More than 200 people on the whole plane died, and only the 4 of them survived. They never thought about why they survived. 4 people who are destined to see God. They don't want to. Xia Changqing will help them complete this task. Don't talk about being soft-hearted. The 4 of them are still alive now. In this case, Xia Changqing only knows that if these 4 people are not killed, there may be 40 people who will be harmed. Xia Changqing approached the 4 people quickly, without hiding his purpose at all. In the blank eyes of the 4 survivors, Xia Changqing waved his wide windbreaker and pulled out the long sword from inside. The blade was shining with cold light. Anyone who was not a fool could know that the person in front of him had bad intentions. Although the 4 survivors were too smart, they could not ignore the danger that was right in front of them. Screams rang out, and the 4 people ran away. But facing 4 ordinary people, if Xia Changqing failed again, he would not have to say anything about dealing with the blood ancestor. The long sword Winter just swung lightly and chopped off the head of the long-haired singer, who made him run the slowest. The life of luxury has hollowed out the singer's body. He can't even compare with a woman. Xia Changqing put away the sword, didn't even look at the singer, and caught up with the only woman among the four intersteps. The long sword pierced through her back and came out from her heart. Xia Changqing did not show mercy just because she was a woman. Drawing the sword and moving forward, the third man had already fallen to the ground out of fear. Why? As soon as he asked his question, Xia Changqing's sword had already slashed across his neck. Even if he had a lot of questions, he was destined not to get an answer. In fact, there was no reason at all. If you want to blame someone, blame fate. When they got on the same plane with the blood ancestor, the ending was already doomed. The last one was the captain of the plane that had the accident. As a captain, years of exercise gave him a strong body, which was a natural advantage in escaping. However, Xia Changqing had already dealt with the other 3 people and sped up. How could he escape? In just 10 seconds, Xia Changqing had already caught up with the captain. The sword rose and fell, and the captain did not escape the fate of death. Stop! A shrill shout rang out. Xia Changqing had just retracted his sword and looked up at the source of the sound. The person who spoke was Ephraim Goodwindsor, the pig's foot. Dr. River's assistant was already scared and screamed. Xia Changqing ignored Ephraim's intentions. Although there were still things that needed his help, it was obviously not the right time. Doctor, we will meet again. Xia Changqing nodded at Ephraim. Put down your weapon. I have called the police. You have nowhere to escape. Ephraim warned loudly from a distance. Xia Changqing smiled and shook his head. He ignored the stubborn doctor and raised his sword. In the other's eyes of fear and anger, he reached out and wiped the sword. The blazing flames quickly spread to the entire sword. Got! With a cry of surprise, Xia Changqing touched the corpse with his sword, and the fire snake immediately jumped onto the corpse. Xia Changqing walked towards where he came from and set fire to every corpse he passed by. Then, he swung the sword, extinguished the flames on it, put it back on his waist, and wrapped his windbreaker tightly. Before Ephraim and the others could react, Xia Changqing had already gotten into Abraham's car. Professor, we should run away. Of course. Abraham came back to his senses. He started the car and looked at Xia Changqing in surprise. What is that? Some kind of witchcraft? Professor, can you focus on the front? You are driving. I will satisfy your curiosity when we get back. Xia Changqing looked at Abraham with amusement. Chapter 94 White Blood. Brooklyn, inside an antique shop. Abraham held up his cane sword, the silver blade burning with blazing flames, reflecting his face full of ravines, his eyes revealing an eagerness to try. Xia, is this magic or witchcraft? The old and strong Abraham swung the sword blade with great vigor. But he was really too old. After waving the cane sword a few times, he had to stop and sit back in the chair, panting. I'm really old, alas. Abraham sighed and pounded his knees. At his age, he could still maintain his daily life, but it would be too difficult for him to fight. Professor, you can't accept your old age now. You have to wait until you eliminate the blood ancestor before you retire. Xia Changqing joked, holding a pistol in his hand and making a naming gesture. Pop. Xia Changqing made a sound of shooting. This was the first time he had touched a real gun since he grew up. The toy guns he played with when he was a child were really incomparable to real guns. Xia Changqing really didn't expect that Abraham actually had a gun here. He always thought that the old man only used his cane sword. Professor, please teach me how to use a gun. Xia Changqing, who was very excited, picked up the silver bullets and pressed them into the magazine one by one. He just hated that the space here was too small and it was not suitable for practicing with a gun. Abraham sat on the chair and glanced at Xia Changqing. Compared with Xia Changqing, who was very keen on guns, Abraham loved his cane sword more. My shooting skills are not good either. There is nothing I can teach you. No, Professor, at least tell me some shooting skills, such as 3 points and 1 line. Gun skills are easy to understand, but difficult to master. An ordinary person who has just come into contact with a gun can use a gun to hurt people as long as he can pull the trigger, but it is not so easy to practice good shooting skills. However, Xia Changqing has been urging Abraham to teach him shooting skills because he has a cheat. A life with cheats does not need explanation. Abraham was impatient with Xia Changqing's urging, and finally casually told Xia Changqing a few things to pay attention to when shooting. Such nonsense as keeping your hand steady and aiming according to your feelings. However, Xia Changqing did not dislike it, because just after the old man finished speaking, the words unlocking shooting skills appeared on his system panel. This is a life of cheating. Xia Changqing showed a smug smile on his face. He searched for a holster from Abraham's room and hung it around his waist. Sword in the right hand, pistol in the left hand, so happy. In fact, there are not only silver bullets in Professor Abraham's room, but he also made silver powder bombs himself. All of this is prepared to deal with the blood ancestor. Xia, your origin is really mysterious. To be honest, I'm not sure about you. Abraham has been watching Xia Changqing quietly for a long time. When you killed people, you acted like a cold-blooded executioner, but now you're playing with a pistol like a child who just got a new toy. Really, I feel like I can't see you clearly. Professor, don't worry. Xia Changqing naturally knew that Abraham would have a lot of doubts in his heart, mainly because he was too vague about his origins. However, there was nothing he could do about it. After all, Xia Changqing came to this world suddenly. He was like a rootless duckweed. No matter how he justified himself, there would be loopholes. Professor, don't worry. Xia Changqing repeated again, at least you know that our purpose is the same, which is to completely kill the blood ancestor. Isn't that enough? Not enough. Xia, tell me the truth. Your purpose is definitely not just as simple as killing the blood ancestor. Judging from your age, you and the blood ancestor have no hatred at all. Even if you know witchcraft, this is not a reason for you to destroy the blood ancestor. Abraham panted slightly. Today's consumption was too much for him. The old man's words made Xia Changqing fall into silence. After staring at the old man for a long time, Xia Changqing finally slowly stated his purpose. Professor, you are right. There is no deep hatred between me and the blood ancestor. I'm not going to destroy him because of his status as a vampire. I'm not that great. Xia Changqing's voice was slightly cold. These words were also a test for him to look directly into his heart. The purpose of doing this is all for power. For power. Abraham looked at Xia Changqing in astonishment. He never expected to hear such an answer. Yes, it is for power. Xia Changqing glanced at the heart in the bottle on the table. Professor, you can live to this age. Isn't it because of the power of white blood? White blood extracted from ordinary insects can prolong people's lifespan. What if it is white blood extracted from the blood ancestor itself? Xia Changqing felt that at this moment, he was especially like a villain who would do anything to gain power. Professor, I believe you have also heard the legend of the birth of the blood ancestor. The white blood extracted from the blood ancestor is very likely the blood of the fallen angel. This is Xia Changqing's main purpose. He does not need ordinary white blood. What he wants is white blood extracted from the blood ancestor itself. Old man Abraham looked at Xia Changqing in astonishment. He never expected that Xia Changqing would have such ambitions. He actually wanted to hunt the blood ancestor. Professor Abraham opened his mouth and only uttered one syllable. In fact, he didn't know how to evaluate Xia Changqing's goal. Suddenly, Abraham's breathing became rapid. He immediately took out his medicine with trembling hands and quickly swallowed a few pills. This man is old and can't stand being frightened. Xia Changqing's cold face immediately collapsed. He didn't want to scare the old man directly because of his words. Professor, how do you feel? Xia Changqing stepped forward and patted the old man's back to help him breathe. Abraham waved his hand. I'm not going to die yet, but with my current body, I can't stand the test of fighting. After saying this, Abraham was silent for a while. He was obviously unwilling. He would rather die in the battle with the blood ancestor than linger like this. Boy, help me get the bottle. Xia Changqing looked in the direction Abraham pointed. The bottle he was talking about was the bottle containing the heart on the table. After just a little thought, Xia Changqing understood what Abraham was going to do. With the old man's current body, he could not support him to fight. He now needed white blood to make himself stronger. Chapter 95. Get the list. When Xia Changqing took the bottle, he clearly saw the heart in the bottle beat slightly. Xia Changqing was not frightened by such a scene. He knew that it was not because the heart was still alive, but because there were blood clan worms in the heart. Boy, I need you to help me. Abraham took the bottle and opened the bottle cap. Go and help me light the alcohol lamp and add 50 milliliters of water to the beaker. Xia Changqing did as he was told. Abraham was going to use the worms to extract white blood, which would also be helpful for him to extract the blood of the blood ancestor in the future. When Xia Changqing put the beaker in place, Abraham had already opened the bottle mouth, cut his finger with a knife, and ripped a few drops of blood into the bottle. The slightly turbid water was immediately dyed red by the blood. Under Xia Changqing's careful observation, thin and long worms could not wait to rush out of the heart, and the blood was tempting them. Abraham took out the tweezers and clamped the worms that were feasting on blood. Boy, be careful not to let any worm touch your body, or I will have to kill you with great pain, Abraham warned. Xia Changqing chuckled. He knew very well how powerful these worms were. As long as they touched human skin, they would directly drill into the human body, and in a short time, they would multiply and quickly occupy the entire human body. Professor, you have to be careful too. If you are infected, I will not show mercy. Professor Abraham glared at Xia Changqing. At this time, his hands did not tremble anymore, and he threw the worms into the beaker very steadily. After catching 3 worms in a row, Abraham stopped, and after sealing the bottle tightly again, the professor lit the alcohol lamp. The water in the beaker soon boiled. What made Xia Changqing feel awe-inspiring was that, even though the water had been boiling for several minutes, the 3 worms were still rolling and wandering. The boiling water did not kill them immediately. This strong vitality was really shocking. However, Professor Abraham was very patient. When the water in the beaker was about to dry up, he added water and persisted until the 3 worms were completely boiled. At this point, Professor Abraham also took a little sample and put it under the microscope, motioning Xia Changqing to look. Under the microscope, in a tiny drop of water, there were actually tiny white dots that were invisible to the naked eye swimming in it. Boiling with water cannot completely kill these worm eggs. As long as they enter the human body, they can multiply and grow rapidly. Professor Abraham explained lightly. Then he reached out and took a small bottle of silver powder and sprinkled it in the beaker. Silver can completely kill these worm eggs. Remember, the process of extracting white blood must be very cautious. Abraham held a small bottle of finished product in his hand and still did not forget to remind Xia Changqing. Then he dripped 2 drops of the extracted white blood into his eyes respectively. After waiting quietly for a while, the old man's condition improved visibly. Abraham exhaled, and after a long time, he sighed and said, "The white blood is getting less and less helpful to me. I don't know when it may completely fail." "Don't worry, Professor," Xia Changqing said comfortingly, "I will let the blood ancestor die before you." The next day, the two packed up, took their equipment, and set out again to clean up the soul-returning corpses. In order to ensure that Abraham would die behind the blood ancestor, Xia Changqing made a special insurance for him. Since the soul-returning corpses always like to lick other people's necks with their tongues, Xia Changqing made a very special equipment for Abraham. A silver neck guard that can be perfectly buckled together to protect the neck. This made Professor Abraham very repulsive. He believed that only animals wear such a collar-like thing on their necks. Xia Changqing just said, "Why is this old man still not convinced of his age?" and let Abraham wear the silver neck guard obediently. Their goal today is to clean up as many resurrected corpses as possible, but before that, they must first master the specific home addresses of all the people on the plane. I have to see that stubborn doctor again. This is really a headache. Xia Changqing sat in the car and sighed helplessly. To be honest, he didn't want to get in touch with the pig feet in this world. The pig feet would only hold him back except for screaming. "Professor, I'll leave the search for the list to you. I don't want to be arrested by the police. The police in this world are also cerebral palsy." Xia Changqing vaguely remembers that there will be a solar eclipse soon. At that time, the resurrected corpses hiding in the sewers will run out. But those police turned a blind eye to it and didn't even pay attention to why a 2-meter-long tentacle grew in a person's mouth. Not to mention other places, the senior officials in New York may have been seduced by the blood ancestor, otherwise they would not have done nothing. As I said, in the face of the temptation of eternal life, few ordinary people can bear it. Professor Abraham naturally knew that it was not appropriate for Xia Changqing to show up now. There was no other way. This matter could only be handled by the old man. The CDC in New York was easy to find. The two drove to the vicinity and Abraham went to find the list of people who died in the plane. The CDC must have these documents. When they took over the bodies, they needed this list so that they could send the bodies back to their respective families in the future. Xia Changqing sat in the car and waited. Half an hour later, Professor Abraham opened the door and threw a stack of lists to Xia Changqing. Fortunately, we have fulfilled our mission, kid. We have work to do. Xia Changqing took the list and flipped through it page by page. He asked curiously, Professor, how did you get the list? I don't think Efrain Goodwinser would be so kind. Don't worry about it. Let's go according to the address on the list. Looking at Professor Abraham, who was reluctant to say more, Xia Changqing became more and more curious. Professor, you didn't steal the list from the CDC, did you? Xia Changqing suddenly thought of this possibility. The old man was not a law-abiding person. Abraham glared at Xia Changqing and said unhappily, how can you call it stealing when dealing with a returning corpse? Drive carefully. Seeing that the old man was a little angry, Xia Changqing quickly put away his teasing thoughts. He didn't want to stimulate the old man to have another attack. He still had a lot of things to do today. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 96. My sword shines with silver light. New York is a big city after all. It is difficult for Xia Changqing and Abraham to clean up the returning corpses with their own strength. The engine of the old car is already roaring as hard as it can, but after a day, the effect is still unsatisfactory. My sword shines with silver light. Abraham hummed in a low voice, and the silver sword drew an arc in the air, accurately cutting off the head of a returning corpse. Tiny insects were wriggling in the splashing white liquid. Xia Changqing set the corpse on fire, and finally took a look at the surrounding rooms. After making sure that the family was in good condition, he left with satisfaction. Really, a whole family is dead. To be honest, Xia Changqing was also very puzzled. He didn't know what these Americans were thinking. The news had already reported the death of their family members, and a person who was originally dead ran back alive, and they didn't even feel strange, and didn't even plan to call the police. It really deserved that the whole family became returning corpses. Professor, are you still okay? Should we stop here today? Xia Changqing glanced at Abraham. After a day of running around, even with the help of white blood, the old man's physical strength gradually began to fail. Boy, haven't you heard a saying? How can a man say he can't do it? Look quickly, where is the next nearest family? The old man was still very humorous. Xia Changqing laughed secretly, took out the list, and flipped through it. Next, let me see who is so lucky. I found it, a little girl named Emma. The car started, and the old and the young rushed to the next target. Before it was completely dark, they had to kill as many soul-returning corpses as possible. Xia Changqing's purpose was very simple. Although he couldn't find where the blood ancestor was hiding now, as long as he killed enough soul-returning corpses, he would be able to lure the blood ancestor out sooner or later. Even if the blood ancestor was able to hide, he would sooner or later not be able to bear this great humiliation when he saw his men being killed bit by bit. Squeak, the car brakes sounded, and Xia Changqing jumped out of it. Professor, hurry up, someone got there first. Damn it, don't they know that Emma is mine? After getting off the car, Xia Changqing saw a car parked casually in front of them. How can you park so casually? Xia, calm down, are you too excited? Abraham looked at Xia Changqing strangely. As time went by, he found that the young man was actually jumping around. Hurry up, ordinary people are no match for the resurrected corpse. Xia Changqing put away the smile on his face, drew his sword, and walked quickly into the dim room. Jokes aside, the resurrected corpse still had to be killed, and people still had to be saved. Xia Changqing pushed the door open, and entered the gloomy room, surrounded by an ominous atmosphere. He stretched out his hand and touched the sword, and the flames ignited, illuminating the darkness around him. At this moment, Xia Changqing heard a woman's shrill scream, and he rushed over to find the sound. I saw a little girl in red leaning her body and sticking out her tongue vigorously, trying to suck the blood of the two criminals who broke into her room. Unfortunately, her height was not satisfactory. Although her tongue bounced, she could not touch the throats of the two people. The resurrected corpse always has an obsession with people's throats. Stop, let go of that little girl, let me do it. Xia Changqing shouted and rushed into the room. The flaming Valyrian steel sword quickly passed by, and the little girl's head was cut off. Ah god. The sharp soprano sounded again. Xia Changqing looked at the two people he had just rescued with some surprise. He was busy saving the little girl just now, and didn't look carefully. Now Xia Changqing looked carefully at the two people, and they were Ephraim and Nora he had seen before. Nora was covering her mouth, looking like she had no desire to live, and she seemed to have a lot of opinions about him killing the little girl. Xia Changqing pouted secretly. He couldn't stand such a saint, and naturally didn't want to deal with such a person. You killed her? Nora questioned Xia Changqing. I remember you. You are the murderer. Knowing that I'm a murderer, you still dare to question me? Xia Changqing thought coldly in his heart. He didn't have the time to explain to the other party patiently like in the TV series. Just when Xia Changqing was about to make a few sarcastic remarks, another soul-returning corpse ran in from outside the door. This large soul-returning corpse looked like the family of the little Lali. Let me send you to reunite with your family. Xia Changqing was about to swing the sword, but the soul-returning corpse took a few steps back nimbly and did not make a gesture to attack. Xia Changqing was stunned. The soul-returning corpse seemed to have suddenly regained consciousness, which made Xia Changqing have a flash of thought in his mind. Blood ancestor? Xia Changqing asked tentatively. Human, do you know what you are doing? It was indeed the blood ancestor. Xia Changqing knew it in his heart, but the question asked by the blood ancestor was too unprofessional. He swung the long sword in his hand. Of course I know what I'm doing. I will send all of you monsters to hell. Well said, Xia, blood ancestor. Why don't you dare to show up in front of us? Are you just hiding like a rat in the gutter? Abraham said as he walked into the room. He looked at the soul-returning corpse with hatred. Ah, it's you, human. I remember you. You are not dead yet. But it seems that your condition is not very good. How about it, tiny human? Throw yourself into my arms. I can give you eternal life. And then become your puppet? Become a parasite of a pathetic insect. Bah, you disgusting monster. Professor Abraham, who was still strong and vigorous, spat at the soul-returning corpse without any hesitation. Although this was not the real body of the blood ancestor, it also made him furious. No one dared to humiliate the great blood ancestor in this way. Human, have you succeeded in angering them? Run away. Hide. The great blood clan will find you, and you will lose your blood and soul. Blood ancestor shouted harsh words, but Xia Changqing saw his fierce appearance. If blood ancestor was really a big boss, he should have said harsh words and made them never see the sun tomorrow. Blood ancestor, are you done talking? If you are, get out of here quickly. I still have to send this man to reunite with his daughter. Xia Changqing pointed his long sword directly at the returning soul corpse. Blood ancestor seemed to see the long sword burning with flames in Xia Changqing's hand. He said with a little reluctance, human, it seems that you have rejected my kindness. You have chosen the wrong direction. Chapter 97 Planning. The long sword was burning, and the blood ancestor was roaring. Xia Changqing tilted his head and suddenly said, no, blood ancestor, I want to join you. Please show up and grant me eternal life. Xia Changqing's impatient attitude made the blood ancestor pause slightly. He seemed to have not expected Xia Changqing to answer like this. For a moment, he was speechless. The room was silent for a full 20 seconds. The blood ancestor suddenly roared, despicable human, you don't want to become a great blood clan at all. You want to trick me into you, right? It's a pity that you found out, blood ancestor. I didn't expect that with your little bug brain, you could find out that I was lying to you. Xia Changqing sighed and did not hide his intentions at all. To be honest, for a monster like the blood ancestor whose body is a bug, he didn't even have the idea of pretending to be nice. Despicable human, you. Before the blood ancestor finished speaking, Xia Changqing's long sword swept across, and the head of the soul-returning corpse fell to the ground with a thud. Does it sound good? A good sound is a good head. It's done. I don't know why the blood ancestor has so much to say, and disturbed me from finishing work and having dinner. Xia Changqing swung his sword and the flames ignited the bodies of the two resurrected corpses. Abraham nodded in satisfaction at Xia Changqing's attitude. When Xia Changqing said he wanted to gain eternal life, he was a little panicked. What on earth? What happened? Who is the blood ancestor? Who are you? Huh? Hearing the question, Xia Changqing turned around and looked at Ephraim and Nora and asked in surprise, why haven't you run away quickly? Why should we run away? Can you tell me what's going on? Ephraim asked a little madly. What happened just now directly made his three views collapse. How should I explain it? Xia Changqing touched his chin and suddenly turned to look at Abraham. Professor, why don't you explain it to them? After all, you are very familiar with the blood ancestor. Boy, do you know how to be considerate of the elderly? Professor Abraham complained, but still explained the matter about the blood ancestor to Ephraim and the others. After learning about these things, Nora looked like she had no desire to live. She asked unwillingly, is there no way to save them? Emma is still a child. Of course, you can pray to your God. Maybe he will send down a miracle and save these innocent people. Don't you have any conscience at all? Nora yelled at Xia Changqing. What are you yelling about? Xia Changqing looked at the other person with cold eyes. To leave these resurrected corpses alone is to be truly conscienceless. Don't worry, if you are infected, I will definitely kill you the first time. Hearing the coldness in Xia Changqing's tone and Abraham's self-righteous expression, Ephraim quickly pulled Nora over. I'm sorry, sir, Nora didn't mean that. Xia Changqing waved his hand and said indifferently, what she meant is none of my business, and I definitely didn't mean to threaten her. I'm telling the truth. Anyone, including Professor Abraham, as long as you are infected, I will never show mercy. Abraham nodded approvingly. That's right, kid, if I get infected one day, don't be emotional and reluctant to do it. Xia Changqing laughed and said unceremoniously, don't worry, Professor, my sword is very fast, and you will definitely not feel pain when the time comes. Ephraim and Nora, who were standing aside, looked at each other, their eyes full of disbelief, and they couldn't believe that the old and the young were talking and laughing about killing each other. By the way, Dr. Goodwindsor. Xia Changqing suddenly turned around and said with a smile on his face, as if the person with a cold face just now was not him. Just call me Ivor. Okay, Ivor. Xia Changqing followed suit. Do you have a colleague named, called Jin, right? Yes, what happened to Jin? Ephraim asked anxiously and puzzled. Doctor, don't be nervous. Of course he is fine. I just want to ask him for help with something. Seeing that the three people present all cast puzzled eyes, Xia Changqing had to explain to them. At the airport, I warned him not to let any vehicles go, but unfortunately, he didn't listen to my advice. Did he let the blood ancestor's coffin cross the river? Abraham looked at Xia Changqing and said angrily, Professor, don't be angry, he is just a poor man. As far as I know, he had to agree to help with this matter because of his wife's illness. Yes, Jin's wife is indeed sick. Ephraim also helped to explain. The reason I want to find him is not to blame him or anything, but I hope he can help to make an appointment with the person who asked him to do this. Do you know who is the person behind this? Professor Abraham asked excitedly. That's right. Xia Changqing looked at Abraham. Professor, that man is your old friend. Ahorst. Professor Abraham said word by word, full of murderous intent between the lines. Ahorst is really an old friend of Abraham. When he was young, Abraham was once held in a concentration camp, and the manager of the concentration camp was Ahorst. Later, Ahorst personally selected Abraham and built an exquisite coffin specifically for the blood ancestor. After the end of World War II, Ahorst was completely transformed into a second-generation vampire who retained his own thoughts under the white blood of the blood ancestor. Until now, Ahorst still maintains a strong body, which Abraham can never compare to, but Abraham has long wanted to kill Ahorst. In the concentration camp, his grandmother was ordered to be killed by Ahorst. Boy, do you want to lure Ahorst out? That's right, Professor. A-Horst is the right-hand man of the blood ancestor. Now the blood ancestor is hiding in some sewer. Let's cut off one of his arms first and see if he is in a hurry. Boy, I support you to do this. Dr. Goodwindsor, it's up to you to convince your friends. Hearing this, Ephraim understood the general situation. It turned out that Jin was responsible for everything that happened today. Okay, I promise you, we will go to Jin's house early tomorrow morning. I will go too, Admi. Nora also shouted hurriedly. To be honest, Xia Changqing didn't want to bring these burdens with him at all. Chapter 98 Cutting off one of his arms. The chilly winter brought a different feeling to the metropolis of New York. The pedestrians on the road were wearing more clothes, and their footsteps were still hurried, coming and going in a hurry, and living in a hurry. Jin was envious of this boring life that used to be day after day, because his ordinary life was gone forever. Thinking of the man with a sword and a gun, he couldn't help but feel a throbbing in his heart. Jin did not think about calling the police. However, his wife was in his hands. Of course, it was not a hostage-taking behavior. The man used the excuse that something big was going to happen in New York and he could protect his wife's safety. Bullshit. What that man said was bullshit. Jin was very sure that this was the threat that the man made to him. It was a pity that he had always regarded Ivor and Nora as his best friends, but they were actually in cahoots with that man. The person who was scolded in Jin's heart was naturally Xia Changqing. He was not far from Jin at this time. This was a subway station, located underground, and it was difficult to receive sunlight. Considering that those vampires who hide their heads and show their tails dare not be exposed to the sun, Xia Changqing specially chose such a place for Jin to meet A-Horst. Time passed little by little, and seeing that the person he had made an appointment with did not come, Jin's forehead gradually oozes sweat, and his heart is in a panic. If the thug fails to achieve his goal, he doesn't know how he will treat him. Are you nervous? A gentle voice sounded in Jin's ears. Jin immediately turned around and looked back. A-Horst's face, which was always smiling, appeared in front of him. Mr. A-Horst. Before Jin finished speaking, A-Horst had already noticed the other party's erratic eyes and the forehead that was oozing sweat in the winter. Under the human skin, there is a terrifying monster hidden, but A-Horst, although a monster, also has a keen observation that ordinary people do not have. Following Jin's wandering gaze, A-Horst tilted his head and found that the person Jin was looking at was an Asian with an unusually young face. As if noticing his gaze, the Asian raised his drooping eyes and smiled gently at him. A-Horst smiled in return, but his smile froze on his face as soon as it appeared. He watched the young Asian man reach out from his arms and take out a pistol, aiming at him. Bang! The gunshot rang out, and A-Horst cried out in pain. In his incredible eyes, Jin had already bent over and slipped away. Is this a trap? A-Horst realized this belatedly, and he didn't care about his elegant posture. He rolled on the ground and hid behind the seats for pedestrians to rest. The rows of seats became the perfect barrier at this time. After temporarily being safe, A-Horst felt an indescribable pain in his shoulder. The wisps of white smoke coming out of the wound made A-Horst understand instantly. It's a silver bullet. Who wants to kill him? The face of the Asian man is unfamiliar. In an instant, A-Horst thought of many things in his mind, and then he only had one thought left, that is, to escape. The faster the better. In the distance, Xia Changqing took back the pistol and put it back in the holster, sighing with some regret in his heart. His shot was clearly aimed at the vampire's forehead, but it hit the opponent's shoulder. What a pity. Because the commotion caused by the gunshot has already appeared, the crowd screamed and fled in panic. Happy America, gun battles every day. The daily life of the American people is in dire straits, and shootings are also common, so they are not panicked and quickly leave from the escape passage. As long as I run faster than others, the bullets can't catch up with me. Ordinary people think so, and A-Horst thinks so too. He hid in the crowd, his feet were full of wind, and in a moment, he had disappeared from the spot. Xia Changqing narrowed his eyes slightly and scanned the crowd. He didn't see A-Horst, but he was not worried. He attached a trace of shadow power to the silver bullet. As a shadow separated from him, no matter where A-Horst ran, he could not escape his pursuit. A-Horst sucked in a breath of cold air. At this time, he had already left the crowd behind, turning left and right in the subway line that was like a secret passage, and came to a remote place. With a sigh of relief in his heart, a Horst finally had time to stop and glanced at the wound on his shoulder. The pain that penetrated his soul came one after another, but the bullet made of silver made him have no way to deal with it. Although his heart was full of murderous intent, a Horst's face did not have any expression. This face was just a layer of human skin, and it was difficult for him to make rich expressions. Does it hurt? The first time he heard this strange voice, a Horst made an evasive move, but his action was still a little slow. Bang! The gunshot rang out. In this confined space underground, the sound was transmitted back and forth, which seemed extremely harsh. A Horst screamed and fell to the ground, holding his thigh. Another silver bullet. You. Bang! As soon as a Horst said this, he screamed again. The left leg was shot just now, and the right leg was shot this time. Sorry, I think it's safer this way. Xia Changqing put away his gun and emerged from the darkness. Looking at a Horst who was lying on the ground and couldn't even stand up, he couldn't imagine that this was the person Abraham hated all his life. To be honest, this kind of blood race is too weak. Whether it is Silver or Sun, they can be easily killed. And the power of modern society, it is easy to create a special forces fully equipped with silver bullets. As long as humans want, they can kill these blood races like crushing ants. It's a pity that the human leaders in New York, or America, have been confused by immortality, which gave the blood ancestor a chance to develop. Who are you? A Horst, who was lying on the ground, asked very unwillingly. He didn't take this trip seriously at all, and he didn't even take Jin seriously. But he didn't expect that the boat turned over in the gutter. The blood ancestor's plan was about to be completed. He had the opportunity to become an important member of this new empire. A Horst's eyes flashed with strong unwillingness. What can I do if I'm unwilling? The blood race must die. Xia Changqing thought coldly in his heart. He drew out his sword and walked forward without saying a word. A Horst was not the blood ancestor, so he didn't have the time to waste with a puppet. Chapter 99, New York Riots. Wait a minute. Looking at Xia Changqing holding a sword and approaching, a Horst's eyes were full of panic. He had already obtained eternal life and did not want to die like this. Don't kill me, my lord can give you eternal life. Ha, this is the only excuse for the blood clan. Xia Changqing sneered in his heart, unmoved, and continued to approach a Horst. Seeing that Xia Changqing was unwilling to talk, a Horst's eyes flashed with cold light. His body moved backwards like a worm, while calculating the distance between the two. After Xia Changqing walked into a Horst's hunting range, the blood clan suddenly opened his mouth, and a terrifying and disgusting tentacle-like mouthparts ejected. I have been prepared for this move of yours. A flash of white light passed by, and a Horst's mouth suddenly let out an incomprehensible roar. His mouthparts had been cut off by Xia Changqing. The next second, Xia Changqing turned the long sword horizontally, and the blade slashed a Horst's neck and cut off his head, so that a Horst no longer had to endure the pain. Really, too weak. This thought flashed through Xia Changqing's mind, and then he set fire to a Horst's body. The left and right arms of the blood ancestor were now cut off at the roots, which was enough for the blood ancestor to have a headache. Putting the long sword back on his waist, Xia Changqing left the place without looking back. Just half an hour after Xia Changqing left, an indescribable huge black shadow suddenly appeared here. The black shadow stared at a Horst's burned remains for a long time before floating away. Xia, did you really kill a Horst? Absolutely true. I cut off his head with my own hands. After hearing Xia Changqing's very certain words, Abraham stood there in a daze for a long time. The enemy who had entangled with him for a lifetime was killed so easily. Unexpectedly, a Horst is very weak. Hearing Xia Changqing say this, Abraham recovered from his daze, and the corners of his mouth twitched slightly. Are you hinting at something? If a Horst is weak, then what is the point of me who is always at a disadvantage? Abraham decided to ignore this arrogant young man. However, after a moment, Abraham couldn't help but speak up. There was no way. Although a Horst had surrendered, the blood ancestor was still alive. As long as the blood ancestor was alive, he couldn't rest easy. Xia, what are your plans next? I don't know which sewer the blood ancestor is hiding in. We have to find a way to pull him out. A host has been killed. I don't believe that the blood ancestor can still keep his composure. However, the development of things was far beyond Xia Changqing's expectations. The revenge he imagined did not come. The blood ancestor seemed to be unaware of this and chose to swallow his anger. Xia Changqing's daily cleaning of the blood clan began to be inefficient. When he found the homes of the plane crash victims according to the list, he found that each family had already been deserted. After that, Xia Changqing changed his target and set his sights on the sewers. However, New York is too big and the sewers are interconnected. The number of vampires is too small now. It is not like looking for a needle in a haystack to find these monsters. 2 days ago, a heavy snowfall made the whole New York white. The news on TV has long been warming up. New York will soon be able to see the grand view of the total solar eclipse. While many people are looking forward to this total solar eclipse, Xia Changqing and Abraham are full of worries. However, although Xia Changqing can lure out a host and kill him, he can't stop the arrival of the total solar eclipse, let alone the upcoming hunting time. Time does not stop at the will of an individual, and most people in New York will not stop working because of a total solar eclipse. In Abraham's antique shop in Brooklyn, Xia Changqing looked at the bustling streets with people coming and going, and his heart was cold. After today, the number of vampires will definitely increase significantly. This is inevitable. Although the resurrected corpses will also move at night, it is dark at that time. No family will not lock their doors. The resurrected corpses cannot transcend the capabilities of human individuals and cannot break in. This day is different. Because of the total solar eclipse, the resurrected corpses can move freely in the sunlight. At this time, ordinary people will not take more precautions, and it is easy for the resurrected corpses to attack them. Xia, are you just going to wait like this? Do nothing? Abraham looked at Xia Changqing standing at the door, and was very puzzled by Xia Changqing's unmoved attitude. Hearing this, Xia Changqing put down the hilt of the sword that he had been rubbing, and turned to look at Abraham. Professor, New York is too big. With my personal strength, we can't do anything unless we find the location of the blood ancestor. I understand what you said. Abraham said in a low voice. I just don't want to see New York fall into turmoil. I don't know how many people will be killed during the day. Xia Changqing curled his lips and didn't comment on Abraham's compassion. In the final analysis, such a disaster in New York should be blamed on Palmer and those high-ranking government officials. What Xia Changqing can do is to look at the world coldly, look for opportunities, find the blood ancestor, and eliminate the blood ancestor. It's not for the great cause of saving mankind, but simply to drain the blood of the blood ancestor and let the great power return to itself. The moment of the total solar eclipse finally arrived with the passage of time. From the moment the sun was completely covered, from all over New York, from the dark sewers, the resurrected corpses that disappeared one after another emerged. Some of them were the personnel on the crashed plane, and some were the unlucky ones who were infected later. But anyway, these resurrected corpses began to wander the streets, attacking all humans in sight. In a short period of time, the whole of New York became chaotic, and while ordinary people were constantly attacked, the entire New York police system seemed to collapse and did not respond at all. Facing the resurrected corpses, the New York police, who were originally brave and fearless and good at locking throats, seemed to have lost their minds. They did not dare to fire their guns or lock throats. Even if a resurrected corpse ejected a huge mouthput and sucked the blood of passers-by, the police did not feel anything unusual. The whole of New York began to become chaotic, on the one hand, because of the recklessness of the blood ancestors, and on the other hand, because of the inaction of the top leaders. When the total solar eclipse was over, the number of resurrected corpses that had crawled back to the sewers early directly increased several times. And the number of resurrected corpses is not only these. Those who did not die, but were injured and infected, were sent to the hospital, and some went directly home to recuperate. The disaster of resurrected corpses is spreading rapidly. Chapter 100 Hunting Time. The unrest in New York has become more and more serious. At night, New York, which was once a city that never sleeps, is now like a ghost cave, with only wandering souls on the streets. They attack anyone they see. Smart people have already stored supplies and stayed at home, waiting for the top leaders to respond, although they are destined to be disappointed. And stupid people, who can't see the current situation clearly, are destined to become a member of the soul returning corps sooner or later. On this day, just after the sky brightened, a sharp brake sound suddenly sounded on the slightly depressed street. The person who came was Ephraim Goodwinser, the chief doctor of the CDC. The two people who are very familiar with the blood ancestor and the soul returning corpse are here, which is also the purpose of Ephraim's coming here today. He wants to discuss with Abraham and Xia Changqing how to deal with the blood ancestor. But Xia Changqing doesn't like him at all. If he really wants to deal with the blood ancestor, even Abraham can only be a drag. Rejecting Ephraim's kindness, Xia Changqing, with the help of Abraham, was loaded with bombs made of silver powder and a pistol full of bullets. After days of waiting, the revenge of the blood ancestor had not come, which made Xia Changqing lose his patience. He decided to take the initiative. Stepping into the sewer also indicated that Xia Changqing would encounter various unexpected dangers, but Xia Changqing was skilled and bold, and he wanted to take the initiative to hunt the blood ancestor. Of course, boldness is boldness. Necessary defensive measures are still necessary. Xia Changqing has not been idle these days. He asked Abraham to use the stored silver to make a silver chainmail. After the preparations were completed, Xia Changqing entered the sewer alone. In the dim sewer, there was a disgusting smell. Xia Changqing frowned and let the long sword in his hand to illuminate the way forward. The sewers in New York are interconnected, so Xia Changqing certainly couldn't just rush in like a headless fly. As far as he knew, Palmer of the Stoneheart Group was the main investor behind the blood ancestor. So Xia Changqing's goal was also very clear, which was to explore the location of the Stoneheart Group. After going deep into the sewers, Xia Changqing also found the figures of the returning souls one after another. These scattered returning souls were not worth mentioning, especially now at noon. All the returning souls seemed to be in a deep sleep, and they didn't react to Xia Changqing's arrival at all. Killing these returning souls would not have any effect at all, so Xia Changqing simply ignored them and just kept moving forward. The deeper he went, the more returning souls he encountered, which made Xia Changqing know that he had found the right direction. There must be a large number of returning souls around the blood ancestor. There is no doubt about that. Xia Changqing let go of his perception, explored everything around him, and was ready to fight at any time. As he expected, the battle was going to be faster than he thought. Before Xia Changqing saw the figure of the blood ancestor, he was spotted by the resurrected corpses, and the battle was about to start. The burning Valyrian steel sword was unstoppable, and ordinary resurrected corpses were no match for Xia Changqing. The only thing he needed to pay attention to was not to be touched by the bugs that fell out of the bodies of the resurrected corpses he killed. For this reason, Xia Changqing used all his strength to manipulate the power of shadows, allowing a large area of shadows to gather on the surface of his body as the first layer of protection. Even if there were bugs that slipped through the net, there was a layer of silver armor under the shadow protection net. Puff. White liquid splashed, and Xia Changqing chopped and killed all the resurrected corpses he saw around him with a cold face. His pace was not delayed by the resurrected corpses, but instead made Xia Changqing speed up a bit. The blood ancestor could see what he wanted to see through these resurrected corpses. Now the scene of Xia Changqing killing people here must have already fallen into the eyes of the blood ancestor. With the character of the blood ancestor, he might run away if he sees that the situation is not good. Xia Changqing is also worried about this. Cleaning up these ordinary resurrected corpses is not his purpose. Looking at the endless resurrected corpses that surrounded him, Xia Changqing's eyes flashed with disgust. He pulled out the silver powder bomb and threw it hard at the resurrected corpses. Amid the violent explosion, the resurrected corpses died in groups. Xia Changqing kept walking and rushed towards the direction where the resurrected corpses gathered. After eliminating some of the resurrected corpses, Xia Changqing finally saw the real owner of the strip. It was a vast underground space. It can be seen that the blood ancestor had transformed it. A gorgeous coffin was placed in the middle. In front of the coffin stood a tall monster. It was the blood ancestor. Human, I admire your courage and strength. I can give you another chance. Join me and you will become an immortal being. Looking at Xia Changqing who broke in alone, the blood ancestor tempted him again. For the blood ancestor, the body in front of him was a very perfect container. He had already decided that the next body he would choose was the human in front of him. Xia Changqing, who finally saw the true face of the blood ancestor, almost couldn't help vomiting. The blood ancestor was so ugly. For such an ugly monster that shook the world, Xia Changqing could only send him to hell as soon as possible. The flames on the Valyrian steel sword became more blazing, and Xia Changqing rushed straight towards the blood ancestor. Xia Changqing ignored his behavior, which made the blood ancestor angry. Even if he was a bug, he could not tolerate such an insult. The blood ancestor waved his wide cloak and was about to take off. However, to his surprise, his feet were pulled down by a force before they left the ground. Looking down, the blood ancestor looked at a group of wriggling black shadows tightly wrapped around his feet, making him unable to leave the spot. With his limited knowledge, Zuzu had no idea what it was, and Xia Changqing had already arrived. Zuzu's expression became serious. He realized that this should be the method of the human in front of him, but don't underestimate him. He has more than just a few tricks. Zuzu's throat moved, and suddenly a piercing scream rushed towards Xia Changqing, causing Xia Changqing to pause and feel a splitting headache. Xia Changqing leaned on the sword with his hand, relying on his strong willpower to avoid fainting. He quickly mobilized a group of shadows and blocked his ears. The piercing scream disappeared. Xia Changqing picked up the sword again and flew forward. Zuzu finally began to panic, not only because the shadow was crawling towards him like a maggot on his tarsal bone, but also because he found that his methods could not deal with this human. How could a human have such power? Zuzu was puzzled. The restraint of the shadow limited his speed, making him unable to escape, even if he wanted to. The huge mouthparts popped out of the mouth and hit Xia Changqing's throat. In a flash, Xia Changqing held his sword in front of him. The mouthparts of the blood ancestor collided with the sword, and the burning pain from the flames made him scream in pain. The blood ancestor, who originally thought that he could easily kill this human, finally began to panic, but he had no chance to escape. A layer of shadow tightly wrapped up the entire body of the blood ancestor. Xia Changqing took out a silver powder bomb and threw it into the pocket made of shadows. The blood ancestor let out a shrill roar, but he could not stop the explosion of the silver powder bomb. Boom. With a muffled sound, the blood ancestor, who was wrapped in the shadow, was completely silent. However, Xia Changqing knew that the blood ancestor would not die so easily. At least the red worm in his body would not die so easily. Xia Changqing retracted the shadow, allowing the blood ancestor's body to reappear, and in order to prevent the blood ancestor's body from escaping, Xia Changqing covered the entire ground with shadows. After the shadow power was completely withdrawn, a 20 cm long red worm quietly crawled out of the blood ancestor's body in a place that Xia Changqing couldn't see. However, the red worm had just landed when it was noticed by Xia Changqing's shadow, and the tentacles differentiated from the shadow quickly captured the blood ancestor's body. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.